Chun Yong has a portal which takes him to an apocalyptic world where gold and silver is considered trash while food is an SSS rank ultra-rare commodity. While others struggle to survive, he has already reaches the pinnacle of life by exchanging spicy snacks for gold and future technology. In a desert with not much sign of life, everything suddenly goes crazy as we hear a scream. A guy screams that he's dead over and over. He keeps running from some monsters that are right behind him. Suddenly, one pops up right in front of him, but he uses a sliding tackle and dodges the creature. As he looks back, he says that the monster actually knows how to set an ambush. He also says he just arrived in this world and wonders if he's really going to die right here. As he keeps running, he sees something in the distance and says that it looks like cooking smoke. He immediately gets excited and starts running even faster, saying that it must be a human settlement. He says that as long as he can get there, he'll be safe, but suddenly a stone is in the way. His leg hits it and he starts falling, shouting, "Oh crap," while almost crying. As he falls to the ground, he starts rolling. After tumbling around for a bit, he finally ends up flat on the ground while the monsters start catching up to him. The guy immediately gets back up and starts running again, shouting that he will never randomly transmigrate again. Just as he gets close to the human settlement, he suddenly hears a gunshot. A monster right behind him gets taken down and falls directly on top of him. It's a pretty weird situation, and he's clearly terrified. Then the person who fired the shot starts reloading. As more monsters come rushing in, they all get shot down as well. The guy says that he's saved. As he stands up with the monster still on top of him, he looks back and sees a lady. She asks how long he plans on hugging that thing. He suddenly realizes the monster has definitely gotten a little too attached to him. Pushing it away, he tells it not to touch him. Then he thanks the lady, but the lady immediately points the gun right at his face. She tells him not to move and asks for his name. The guy quickly raises his hands in surrender and says his name is Chun Yong, the Yong from Sunshine. The lady asks why he suddenly appeared near their camp. Chun Yong says that if he told her he just got lost and somehow ended up here, would she believe him? The lady says he's still trying to lie to her because she clearly heard him talking about transmigrating earlier. Hearing that, the guy starts panicking in his head and thinks that if he tells her the truth, she'll definitely think he's crazy. Then the lady says he's not talking and that it looks like he doesn't want to live. Suddenly she smells something and says it smells really good. She immediately asks what is in his bag. The guy says, "Oh, you mean this?" After taking something out, he explains that he was just about to eat the spicy strip when he ran into a zombie, so he had to quickly stuff it into his bag. The lady looks confused and asks if he just said it's food. She's clearly suspicious, but she still keeps the gun pointed at him. Chun Yong says that's right and asks if she wants to taste it. The lady thinks the color looks strange and wonders if it might be poisonous. But at the same time, it smells really good, and she hasn't eaten anything for 2 days. In the end, she decides to take it anyway. As she's about to eat it, she thinks she'll eat first and ask questions later. The moment she takes a bite, it's like she reaches heaven. She says it's unbelievably delicious and describes it as the aroma of oil and flavor mixed perfectly with the seasonings. Chun Yong feels like this is a complete victory. In his mind, he says that's exactly how it should be. In an apocalyptic wasteland, no one can refuse food, especially food this good. Then Chun Yong starts explaining his situation. He says he used to be just an ordinary run-of-the-mill wage slave. A few days ago, he was suddenly fired by the company and lost his only source of income. He was feeling really depressed, but unexpectedly, he found a strange ring inside a box of snacks he bought online. He explains that when he put the ring on, he suddenly found himself in a very terrifying world. At that moment, he remembers looking around and thinking that the creature in front of him was a huge rat and wondering where he even was. The rat immediately roared and charged at him. In panic, he shouted that he wanted to go home right now. The moment he said that, he suddenly found himself back in the real world, standing right in front of the empty box his boss had given him after firing him. Looking around in shock, he realized that even though he didn't understand the reason, the ring allowed him to travel freely between reality and the apocalypse. Based on all his years of watching anime, he quickly came to the conclusion that food is hard currency in an apocalyptic world. As long as he uses this advantage well, he believes he can climb to the very peak of life and get everything a guy could ever want. Back in the present, the lady who saved him is still enjoying the taste of the snack. But soon the last piece is gone, and she suddenly says in a slightly embarrassed voice that she finished it. She says she's really sorry and explains that it was just too delicious, so she couldn't hold back. Chun Yong says it's okay. He explains that the organization he belongs to doesn't lack food, but it does lack many other things. which is why he was sent out to exchange supplies. The lady looks confused and says she can't believe that there's an organization in this world that doesn't lack food. Chunyang says she's looking at someone from that organization right now. Hearing that, the lady quickly asks if he can hire her. She explains that she's very familiar with the area and whatever he wants to exchange food for, she can help him find it. She says her commission would just be 15 packs of the spicy strips he gave her earlier per month. Chunyang thinks for a moment and says it's not impossible, but the problem is that he knows absolutely nothing about her. The lady asks what he wants to know. Chunyang says he wants to know her name. She replies that her name is Lilu. Then he asks her gender. She responds by asking if he can't see it for himself. Then he asks her age. She says she's 19. Chunyang looks at her and says that she calls that 19. He comments that for someone living in the apocalypse, her nutrition seems a bit too plentiful. After coughing for a moment, he says that considering how big she is, he'll hire her. He tells her the monthly salary will be 15 packs of spicy strips. The lady immediately gets excited. Lilu thanks him and calls him boss. Chunyang then casually asks if she ever thought about taking him out and snatching the food. Lilu says she's not stupid. She explains that she can tell the difference between having one full meal and being full every meal. Then Lilu says they should go and that she'll take him to the camp. Chunyang tells her to lead the way. Lilu announces that they have arrived and says this is their camp, Gray Rat District D. However, after looking around, Chunyang thinks to himself that this camp is worse than a slum. Still, he decides that since he's already here, he might as well make the best of it. He thinks the first thing he should do is see if he can get his hands on anything valuable. As they walk around the camp and look at the people living there, Lilu tells him not to be nervous. She explains that he's an outsider, so it's normal for everyone to be wary of him. Then she says this is her home and invites him inside to rest for a bit. Chunyang thinks to himself that he's about to enter a pretty girl's home and feels a little excited about it. But the moment he steps inside, he becomes quite disappointed and comments that her lifestyle is very simple. Lilu tells him to sit down first. She pours some water into a cup and hands it to him. Then she says he shouldn't look down on Gray Rat District D just because it's a small camp. She explains that even though the sparrow may be small, it's still has all the vital organs. She then tells him to just say what he wants to exchange the food for, because as long as the camp has it, she guarantees she can find it for him. Chunyang says he needs some gold and silver and asks if she knows what those are. Lilu repeats the words gold and silver and then asks why he would want that kind of trash. Hearing this, Chunyang's mind almost explodes. He thinks to himself that the kind of trash she's talking about costs 800 per gram where he comes from. He explains that gold and silver were very valuable before the Great Cataclysm. Lilu responds by saying that you can't eat gold and that nowadays everything is traded through bartering. Chunyang clears his throat and says that since this is their first trade, what matters isn't exactly what they exchange, but establishing mutual trust so they can pave the way for future transactions. He then opens his bag and shows her a large amount of spicy snacks and some cold drinks. When Lilu sees them, she lets out a shocked wow. Chunyang then says that as long as the deal works out, 1/10 of the food in the bag will be hers, and that it won't affect the commission he already promised her. Lilu can hardly believe it. She says that even if it's meant to build trust, using precious food to exchange for useless gold would be far too big of a loss. But Chunyang simply tells her to do as he says. He tells her he'll leave the supplies with her and that he'll wait there for her to return. Lilu nods and says okay, boss, and promises she definitely won't let down his trust. She grabs her gun and prepares to head out, saying she'll be back as soon as possible. As she leaves, Chunyang thinks to himself that the bag of snacks cost his last 100 yuan, so it has to work. He then lies down and complains that there's no internet and no signal and that it's really boring. After a while, he decides to look around the room. While doing that, he notices a strip of paper and wonders if it's a newspaper. He takes a closer look and reads the date, Gregorian calendar year 2235. Then the next line completely blows his mind. It talks about the Great Cataclysm, nuclear bombs, genetic pollution, and zombies running rampant. About an hour later, Chunyang finally pieces everything together. He says that now he understands. This is Blue Star 200 years in the future. The Great Cataclysm Lilu mentioned was actually a nuclear war. Tens of thousands of nuclear bombs wiped out half of Blue Star's population. On top of that, it changed the entire planet's ecology and created the wasteland that exists now. After realizing this, Chunyang says that it means he didn't travel through space. He traveled through time. Just then, the door suddenly opens and Lilu says she's back. She shows him a bag and explains that there's very little gold and silver left in the camp. She says that what she brought is basically all of it because since it's truly useless now, no one bothers collecting it anymore. Chen doesn't say anything at first, but when he opens the bag and sees the glittering metal inside, the shine almost blinds him. Staring at it in shock, he blurts out that it's unbelievably shiny. After taking all the gold into his hands, Chen feels extremely happy. He starts laughing to himself and says that if the wasteland didn't produce someone like him, Chen, then the ages would be like a long night. Then Li Lu speaks up. She tells him that the value of the food he gave is far above the value of the gold and silver. Because of that, she took the liberty of exchanging it for a Tier 1 enhancement serum for him. She explains that although it's only the lowest level, the purity of this Tier 1 enhancement serum is very high, can be injected directly, and there are no risks. Li Lu also points out that he's obviously just an ordinary person, not an enhanced human. With this serum, dealing with a few low-level zombies shouldn't be a problem. She reminds him that the outside world is dangerous everywhere, and luck can't protect him forever. Chen coughs awkwardly and says that the organization he belongs to is quite powerful, so there's basically no danger during their journeys. He says the troublesome part is only the trading phase, but he still thanks her anyway. Then he packs up his bag and says that the first trade went very smoothly, so he'll head back for now. He tells her he'll come back tomorrow and that he'll settle her monthly salary then. As he starts walking away, he says he's leaving. Watching him go, Li Lu thinks to herself that someone who can travel alone through the wilderness without any danger must be full of secrets. But then she shrugs it off and thinks that in the wasteland, everyone has their own secrets. She starts eating some more of the snacks and says they're incredibly delicious. Then she thinks that as long as he can really keep providing food, that's all that matters. Later in the wasteland, Chen stops at a quiet spot and says that this place should be good enough since there's no one around. He reaches out and touches the air. Suddenly, with a flash, he disappears and returns to the real world, or rather, back in time. Once he's back, he quickly opens the bag and says he wants to check something. Inside, he sees all the gold he brought with him. Realizing that the gold is still there, he says that he's not dreaming. He then thinks that as long as he finds a gold shop to exchange this for money, he'll be rich. He tells himself that he, Chen is about to reach the peak of life. However, he also realizes he needs to control the amount of gold he exchanges at one time, otherwise it might scare people. Looking around carefully, he thinks that after all, there's no way he could explain the origin of this gold to anyone. After thinking about it, he finally lets out a sigh of relief. Then Chen looks at the serum and wonders if he should use the enhancement serum. He thinks that Li Lu has a point. His body is too weak in the apocalypse. Right now, he can't even beat a regular zombie. If he wants to establish a foothold in that world, he has to strengthen himself first. Then another thought crosses his mind. He complains that the thing doesn't even come with an instruction manual and says they really don't care about user experience. After thinking for a moment, he decides to just go for it and injects the serum. The serum immediately enters his bloodstream, but at first he doesn't feel any changes. He comments that it seems like nothing happened. Suddenly his heart starts beating extremely powerfully, and the serum bottle in his hand shatters from the pressure. He begins to feel intense pain and starts screaming, saying it hurts so much that it feels like every muscle in his body is being torn apart. The pain doesn't stop and lasts for quite a while, but slowly his muscles begin to grow and reshape. When it finally ends, he looks down at himself and realizes he's completely jacked. He asks if it's finally over and wonders if that body is really his. He looks at his muscles and says the muscle lines rival Arnold's. He also checks the top of his head and jokes that it hasn't become pointy either. He then comments that doomsday technology is really domineering. After calming down, he thinks about what Li Lu said earlier. She mentioned that this serum was only the lowest level. He starts wondering that if a higher grade serum were used, could it turn someone into something like One Punch Man? Just then, a voice calls from outside and asks Chen to help open the door. Chen says he's coming and goes to open it. A girl named Shuya walks in. She's an 18th tier actress and also Chen Yang's roommate. She apologizes and explains that she forgot her keys. Chen tells her there's no need to be polite since they're roommates anyway. However, the moment Shuya looks at him, she freezes, as if struck by an arrow of passion. Shuya suddenly lets out a giggle and starts walking toward him. Chen gets a little confused and asks Shuya what's wrong with her. Shuya looks at him and says she never noticed before that he's actually so stacked. Then she mentions that she didn't pass her audition today and says he must have come to comfort her on purpose. But as she gets a little too close, Chun-Yang panics. He quickly says no and starts running away, shouting that he just forgot to put on clothes. He rushes into his room and shuts the door behind him. Standing there, he starts thinking that Shuya probably thinks he's a pervert now. After worrying about it for a moment, he decides to forget about it and tells himself that selling the gold is the priority right now. So he heads outside. As he walks down the street, he suddenly notices that the weight of his body feels almost non-existent. Everything feels incredibly light. A moment later, he looks at a sign far ahead and realizes he can clearly read the text from hundreds of meters away. While walking, he also starts noticing sounds much farther away than before. At one point, he overhears a woman gossiping about how old Li's wife cheated on him. After hearing that from such a distance, Chun-Yang realizes that his hearing has clearly been enhanced too. He concludes that the enhancement serum didn't just increase his strength, but improved his overall physical fitness in a very comprehensive way. He then thinks about how even after a nuclear war, the technology in the wasteland world is still 200 years ahead of the present. The value of that world is definitely worth further exploration. Soon he arrives at Lin's gold shop. Looking at the store, Chun-Yang thinks that large jewelry chains might refuse to buy gold with unknown origins, so a private gold shop like this is the safer choice. After entering the shop, he's greeted by a receptionist. Chun-Yang asks if the boss is in because he has some business to discuss with him. The receptionist politely says that he can just tell her what he needs. Without saying much, Chun-Yang opens his bag and reveals the gold inside, explaining that he's afraid she won't be able to make that decision herself. Seeing such a large amount of gold, the receptionist is clearly shocked. Chun-Yang calmly asks what she thinks now. The receptionist quickly tells him to follow her. She leads him to the conference room of Lin's gold shop. After a moment, the boss walks in and introduces himself as Lin Tao, the owner of the shop. He politely asks how he should address him. They shake hands and Lin Tao says it's nice to meet him. Chun-Yang simply says that his surname is Chun. Lin Tao then respectfully addresses him as Mr. Chun and invites him to sit down. Chun-Yang takes out the gold and places it on the table. Lin Tao looks at the gold bars on the table and asks if Chun-Yang wants to sell them. Chun-Yang confirms that he does. Lin Tao picks up one of the bars and examines it carefully. He then says that since the transaction amount is quite large, he needs to use an instrument to verify the purity. He asks if Mr. Chun would mind. Chun-Yang tells him to go ahead. In his mind, Chun-Yang thinks that gold and silver are useless in the Doomsday Wasteland, and no one there even bothers forging gold. So he feels completely confident letting them check it however they want. A moment later, Lin Tao runs the test using the machine. The result shows a purity of 99.99%. Seeing the result, Lin Tao is surprised and thinks that it's actually all pure 9,999 gold. Chun-Yang asks what the result is. Lin Tao says the quality is very good and tells him that he can offer a buyback price of 400 yuan per gram. Hearing that number, Chun-Yang is stunned. In his excitement, he accidentally cracks the glass he's holding. In his mind, he quickly starts calculating. At 400 yuan per gram, one gold bar weighing 1 kilogram would be worth 400,000 yuan. With 3 gold bars, that would be a total of 1.2 million yuan. Just thinking about that number makes him extremely happy inside. Lin Tao says that of course Chun-Yang will need to provide a formal invoice. Chun-Yang says he doesn't have that, but assures him that the source is absolutely clean and there won't be any trouble. Lin Tao replies that words alone are no proof. Buying such a large batch at once carries significant risk for him. Chun-Yang, already cracking the glass in his hand a little more from the pressure, says that Boss Lin should be direct with him. He tells him to skip the usual sales talk meant to push the price down and just say the real offer. He adds that if he finds the price acceptable, they'll make the deal, and if not, they can just consider it as making a new friend. As he says this, he pushes one of the gold bars toward Lin. Lin Tao looks a bit nervous and says that in that case he'll take a loss and buy it for 280 yuan per gram, which comes to exactly 840,000 yuan. Chun-Yang smiles and says that now that sounds more reasonable. A moment later his phone buzzes with a notification saying that he has received a bank transfer of 840,000 yuan. Chun-Yang then places another gold bar on the table and says that the money has been received and it was a pleasure doing business. Seeing that, Lin Tao quickly says that if Mr. Chun has more goods to handle, they can continue cooperating in the future. Chun-Yang casually replies that he'll consider it. After leaving the shop, Chun-Yang thinks to himself that just 3 gold bars brought him more than 800,000 yuan. He then laughs in his mind and thinks that if he sells all the gold bars in his backpack, he'll truly become rich. Later, back at Chun-Yang's residential compound, Zhou Dandan, an office worker who shares the apartment with him, is looking around and asking where her phone is. Another voice tells her that it's on the coffee table and that Su Yan is calling. As she picks up the phone, Chen-yang happens to come back and greets her, asking where she's rushing off to. Su-yen explains that Dan just got home, but her boss suddenly called her back for overtime. Chen-yang sighs and says the timing is terrible, because he just made a small fortune today and was planning to treat both of them to dinner. Dan complains about the situation and tells Su-yen to make sure she eats enough for her share too. Su-yen laughs and says not to worry. Then Dan turns to Chen-yang and jokingly warns him not to make a move on Xiaoya while she's gone. Chen-yang laughs and says she must be joking, asking if he really looks like that kind of person. Dan laughs and tells them to have fun before leaving. Su-yen then jokingly calls him President Chun and asks where they're eating tonight. Chen-yang suggests Li Xing Diehua. Su-yen looks shocked and asks if he's joking, because that's a 5-star place. Chen-yang calmly says he's not joking. He tells them he'll see them tonight. Later, back in his room, Chen-yang opens his bag and pulls out the remaining gold bars. Looking at them, he tells himself there's no time to waste. He decides he needs to exchange all the dozen gold bars today. So he starts visiting different jewelry shop owners one after another. Each time he sells a few bars at slightly lower prices, so the shops are willing to buy them quickly without asking too many questions about invoices. The deals go smoothly and both sides are satisfied. By the end of the day, Chen-yang checks his account and sees his balance has reached 4 million yuan. Not long after, he receives a phone call from Guang Wei. Chen-yang answers and jokingly asks what's up, saying Guang Wei suddenly called and asking if he missed him. On the other side, Guang Wei asks why Chen-yang didn't tell him he lost his job. He also asks if Chen-yang still has money for rent and says he has some spare cash that Chen-yang can use for now. Hearing that, Chen-yang laughs and tells him that brother Yang isn't short on money anymore. But then something starts bothering him. He pauses and asks who told him that he lost his job and wonders if the news has really spread that far already. Guang Wei hesitates a little before explaining that Chen Yang's ex-girlfriend, Peng Jia, told him. He says she mentioned it might not be appropriate for her to help directly, so she asked Guang Wei to look out for him instead. Hearing that name, Chen-yang is surprised and says it was her. Even he feels a bit confused about it. Yang's friend says that he feels like Peng Jia still cares about him and asks why the two of them broke up. Chen-yang explains that Peng Jia's mother required her partner to be able to buy a house in Daijing. He then reminds him that he already knows his family's financial situation. His friend sighs and says that hearing this just strengthens his determination to remain a single dog. Chen-yang then asks something that suddenly comes to mind. He wonders how Peng Jia even found out about his situation, since he hasn't contacted her once since they broke up. His friend explains that it was that rich second-generation kid, Zhang Jinglong, who told her. He reminds Chen-yang that the guy has always been interested in Peng Jia. Then his friend adds something else. He says that supposedly Zhang Jinglong even bought shares in Chen Yang's old company, and specifically named him to be fired just to strike at him. Hearing this, Chen Yang's mood immediately turns dark. He says coldly that it's good, very good, so that's how it really is. His friend quickly tells him to calm down and not do anything stupid. Chen Yang replies that his mind is wandering too far and asks if he really looks like the kind of person who would do something reckless. His friend says that's good to hear, then tells him he's hanging up and that he should take care. Chen Yang says goodbye as well. But the moment the call ends, Chen Yang mutters angrily that Zhang Jinglong is really shameless. After a moment, he suddenly checks the time and realizes it's getting late. He says he needs to hurry to the hotel and immediately starts running. Later, outside the hotel entrance, Chen-yang stands there waiting. He says that Su-yen told him she was almost there too and wonders where she is. Just then, a car pulls up beside him. A voice calls out to him and says he kept her waiting. Su-yen. People nearby immediately start whispering and commenting that she's so beautiful and wondering if she's some kind of celebrity. Su-yen notices Chen-yang staring and asks why he's spacing out. Chen-yang admits that they've been flatmates for 3 months, but he never realized she was actually this good-looking. Su-yen smiles and says that since he's treating her to such a high-end place tonight, she can't let him lose face. She asks how she looks and whether she looks respectable enough. Chen-yang suddenly gets flustered and asks what she's doing when she grabs his hand. Su-yen casually tells him to relax and says it's just social etiquette. She asks why he's getting so nervous and pulls him along, telling him they should go inside. Later, they sit at a table with a beautiful view. Chen-yang hands her the menu and politely asks her to order. Su-yen thanks him and starts looking through it. But as she scans the prices, she quietly thinks to herself that everything here is way too expensive. Chen-yang tells the waiter to bring one of each of the 3 signature dishes, and also 2 Dungeness crabs. The waiter nods and says all right and asks them to wait a moment. After the waiter leaves, Su-yen immediately leans toward Chen-yong and asks why he ordered such expensive food. She points out that 2 Dungeness crabs alone cost around 1,000 yuan. Chen-yong casually tells her not to worry and says he's very flush with cash right now, so he can definitely afford 2 crabs. Su-yen rolls her eyes and tells him to stop pretending to be rich when she knows he usually buys the cheapest mystery box meals online. Chen-yong coughs awkwardly and then explains that his childhood home was recently demolished. Hearing that, Su-yen suddenly brightens up and says that now she understands. She jokes that, in that case, she has no psychological burden about eating the expensive meal. She laughs and says this is basically robbing the rich to feed the poor. Chen-yong just coughs again, slightly speechless. Later, after finishing the meal, Chen-yong asks if she wants to go somewhere else for a second round. Su-yen pats her stomach and says the food was delicious, but she really can't eat anymore. Just then, a man suddenly appears nearby and calls out Chen-yang's name, asking why he's here. Turns out to be Zhang Jinglong. Chen-yong looks at him and says what a coincidence. He comments that Daijing is such a big city, yet he still ran into him just by coming out for a meal. Zhang Jinglong sneers and asks if Chen-yong really thinks he's worthy of eating at a 5-star hotel. Chen-yong calmly responds by asking whether Jingling Diao belongs to Zhang's family and whether he's planning to kick him out. Zhang then says it seems Chen-yong already knows how he got fired. Su-yen, confused, quietly asks Chen-yong if this person is his friend. Meanwhile, Zhang Jinglong glances at Su-yen and is immediately stunned by how beautiful she is. In his mind, he thinks that she's incredibly hot. He then starts scheming to himself. He thinks that Chen-yong must have brought her here to pick up girls, so he decides he'll expose Chen-yong as a poor loser and, if possible, steal the girl away as well. Zhang Jinglong turns to Su-yen and tells her not to be deceived by Chen-yong. He says he's Chen-yang's college classmate and knows him inside out. According to him, Chen-yong is extremely poor, recently got fired, and can barely afford rent. He continues by saying that bringing her to a place like this probably cost Chen-yong a fortune just to pretend to be a big shot. Zhang claims that Chen-yong is the type who first blinds girls with false appearances and then tricks them until they lose both their body and their wealth. Hearing all these insulting accusations, Chen-yong immediately gets angry and asks if Zhang really thinks everyone is as low as he is. Su-yen calmly says that she understands and thanks him for the reminder. Zhang proudly introduces himself as Zhang Jinglong and says he hates seeing beautiful women get scammed. Then he adds that his company is currently looking for an image spokesperson and asks if she would be interested. He even takes out a business card and offers it to her. Su-yen simply swats the card away and says that's a pity, but she's not interested. Zhang tries again and says the benefits and treatment for their spokesperson are very good and asks her to think about it one more time. Su-yen firmly says there's no need. She explains that she is Chen-yang's girlfriend and doesn't like hearing someone badmouth her boyfriend. She then adds that with a director like Zhang, the company will probably go bankrupt sooner or later. Zhang is instantly furious and shouts at her. Meanwhile, Chen-yong quietly gives Su-yen a thumbs up and says she really knows how to put on a show. Su-yen smiles and says she is an actress after all. Then she grabs Chen-yong and tells him they should go and not waste time on trash. The two of them start walking away together. Behind them, Zhang Jinglong is furious. He curses and asks if she's blind for falling for someone like Chen-yong. Then he angrily tells Chen-yong to just wait and see what happens. At that moment, another woman walks up behind him and asks if he can take her home now. It's Chen-yang's ex-girlfriend, Peng Jia. Zhang quickly changes his tone and tells Jia not to rush. He says he already booked a table at a bar and suggests they go have a couple more drinks. But Peng Jia calmly refuses and says there's no need because she's not interested. Zhang looks surprised. Peng Jia then tells him she'll transfer the money for tonight's meal to him. She walks toward the car while Zhang calls after her, repeatedly shouting Jia's name, but she doesn't respond. She simply gets into the car and leaves. Meanwhile, Zhang Jinglong stands there watching Peng Jia leave. Frustrated, he mutters angrily that every single one of them dares to put on airs in front of him. Not far away, Chen-yong and Su-yen are walking together. Su-yen comments that the guy they just met was really annoying. Chen-yong says that although Zhang Jinglong was annoying, running into him actually helped him realize something. Su-yen asks what he means. Chen-yong explains that after suddenly getting a lot of money, he had been wondering what kind of career he should pursue. But now he has made up his mind. He says he's going to open a game company and completely defeat Zhang Jinglong. Su-yen warns him that opening a company is very risky. She tells him he should think things through carefully and not act on impulse. Chen-yong confidently tells her not to worry and says she should just wait and watch the show. Later that night, back Back at Chun Yang's residential compound, he's taking a shower. While bathing, he starts thinking seriously about his situation. He realizes that exchanging goods in the wasteland for gold might work for now, but as his assets grow, it will eventually attract attention or even investigations. Because of that, if he wants to legalize his income, he needs to establish a proper career in this world as well. After finishing his shower, he walks out, pulls a chair in front of his computer, and starts thinking while using it. He concludes that besides its abundant resources, the wasteland's biggest advantage is its technology. According to Li Lu, it has only been about 10 years since the Great Cataclysm there, so the technological inheritance shouldn't be completely lost yet. If he searches carefully, he believes he can definitely find many experts from different fields. Then another idea comes to him. Based on the monthly standards in the apocalypse, he can hire these experts for just 15 packs of spicy strips. With technology that's roughly 200 years ahead of the present, he realizes that creating a cross-era game would be incredibly easy. Back in his building, Chun Yang is on the phone saying that the registration request has been submitted and that he will be contacted by SMS once the approval is complete. He thanks the person on the call and hangs up. After that, he thinks to himself that the company registration has been left to the agent. The next thing he needs to deal with is hiring employees. But before that, he decides he should hurry and buy some food and head to the wasteland again. While thinking about it, he realizes something important. Since that place is actually the world 200 years in the future, it's probably not a good idea to bring snacks again. If someone with sharp eyes notices the production dates, it could create unnecessary trouble. Later, he goes shopping and walks up to a store counter. The receptionist greets him and asks if he wants to buy something. Chun Yang casually says he wants to buy 50 caddies of pork. Hearing that, the receptionist is shocked and repeats the number in disbelief. About half an hour later, Chun Yang is pushing a cart filled with supplies. Looking at it, he happily says he'll take all of it. He also adds 20 caddies of potatoes, 20 caddies of corn, and 20 caddies of Chinese cabbage. Later, back at his home, Chun Yang struggles to carry the large packages inside. As he sets them down, he shouts heave-ho while catching his breath. He then thinks that even though the physique enhancement made this kind of weight feel like nothing, constantly moving things back and forth like this is still very troublesome. He realizes that it's manageable right now since he only has a few supplies, but once the company is established later, how will he move enough food to feed dozens or even hundreds of people? Just as he's thinking about this problem, the ring on his finger suddenly begins to glow. In the next moment, the entire package in front of him disappears. Chun Yang stares in shock and wonders what just happened. Then a thought suddenly comes to him. He checks the ring and realizes that the package is now inside it. Curious, he says the word, summon, and the package instantly reappears in front of him. When he retrieves it again, the package returns back into the ring. Chun Yang immediately becomes excited and realizes that it's actually a storage space. He laughs happily and says the ring not only lets him travel to the wasteland world, but also has other amazing abilities. Overjoyed, he even kisses the ring and calls it really lovely. He jokes that it's like someone delivering a pillow just when he's sleepy and says the ring service is simply incredible. Then, filled with excitement, he declares that it's time to go to the apocalypse again and activates the ring to travel back to the wasteland world. After arriving in the wasteland again, Chun Yang takes the package out of the ring and thinks to himself that he can't reveal his abilities in front of others yet. To avoid arousing suspicion, he decides it's better to carry the supplies normally when he goes to find Li Lu. So he picks up the package and heads to meet her. Meanwhile, Li Lu is sitting alone with the remaining snack from earlier. She takes a small piece and puts it in her mouth. The moment she tastes it, she feels like she's in heaven again and says she really wants to eat another pack. But then she quickly stops herself. She reminds herself that well-sealed food that doesn't rot is a precious resource in the wasteland. If she saves it carefully, one pack could help her survive for more than a week in this desperate environment. Then a sudden thought hits her. She realizes that Chun Yang exchanged precious food for a pile of useless gold yesterday. She starts worrying that Chun Yang might get blamed or punished by his organization for doing that. She tries to comfort herself by thinking that an organization with such abundant food supplies probably wouldn't lack members. For someone like Chun Yang to casually trade food like that, his position must be quite high. Still, she imagines him being punished by the organization and shouting for another chance, which makes her feel uneasy. In the end, she sighs and tells herself that he probably won't come back anyway. Maybe everything that happened yesterday was just a beautiful dream. Just then, the door suddenly opens. Chun Yang walks in carrying a huge package and casually tells her to come help move the stuff. The moment Li Lu sees him, she jumps up in excitement and shouts, "Boss!" She rushes forward and throws herself at him, causing the things he's carrying to scatter all over the ground. Overjoyed, worried. Li Lu says she can't believe he really came back and that it's great to see him again. She even starts tearing up and admits that she thought he was lying to her yesterday. Chun Yang looks confused and asks why he would lie to her. Li Lu explains that yesterday she only brought him a bag of useless gold, and the value of a Tier 1 enhancement serum simply can't compare to a backpack full of food. She believed his organization would definitely punish him for it. Chun Yang calmly tells her not to worry. He says his status in the organization is very high, so a mere bag of food means nothing to them. He also explains that he exchanged for gold because it's useful to him, so he didn't actually lose anything. Li Lu nods as she finally understands. Chun Yang then tells her that if she understands, she should hurry up and pick up the things scattered on the ground. As Li Lu starts gathering the supplies, she suddenly picks up a huge watermelon. Her eyes widen in shock. Staring at it, she exclaims that these are real vegetables and asks in disbelief if his organization actually grows its own vegetables. Chun Yang looks at the vegetable and casually says it's just a Chinese cabbage and asks if it's really worth reacting like that. Li Lu immediately explains that after the Great Cataclysm, the soil became completely polluted. Because of that, vegetables simply can't survive if people try to plant them. Chun Yang waves his hand and tells her to stop crying. He casually says that if she likes them, he'll just give all the vegetables to her since it's no big deal. Hearing that, Li Lu is shocked again. She repeats his words in disbelief and asks if he really means giving them to her. Holding the cabbage carefully, she says the vegetables are far too precious. She explains that she can't even judge their real value, so she cannot accept them. She continues by saying that Chen Yang is a good person for being willing to give her such precious food. But since she works for him, she will only accept the salary she deserves. Hearing that, Chun Yang silently thinks that he just got hit with a good person card. He then tells her that he has already thought about a better salary system for her. Compared to spicy strips, real food that can actually fill her stomach would be much more suitable. He also tells her that if she needs anything else in the future, she can mention it to him. However, in return, her service quality must keep up. Li Lu immediately says she will do her utmost to satisfy him. Chun Yang then clarifies that their current relationship is that of employer and employee. Her role is to act as his personal secretary and answer his questions whenever he needs information. Li Lu quickly says she understands. Chun Yang then explains that he brought meat and vegetables this time because he wants her help hiring more people. Li Lu looks surprised and asks if he wants to recruit more workers. She also asks if he has any requirements. Chun Yang says the first requirement is high loyalty. After that, it would be best if they have some kind of special ability. Li Lu thinks for a moment and suggests that they go to nearby Grey Rat Town. She explains that around 10,000 survivors live there, and no matter what kind of special skills they are looking for, they can probably find someone there. Chun Yang remembers something and asks about the relationship between Grey Rat District D and Grey Rat Town, since earlier she mentioned that their settlement was called Grey Rat District D. Li Lu explains that Grey Rat Town is the central hub. Around it, there are 12 small settlements. These settlements are named with letters, starting from Grey Rat District A and going all the way to District L. She adds that these 12 settlements rely on Grey Rat Town to survive. Whenever they need to exchange for scarce supplies, they go there. Chun Yang then asks an unusual question. He asks if there are many programmers there who understand computer programming, preferably the kind who can make games. When Li Lu hears the word computer, she looks quite surprised. Li Lu looks confused and says she doesn't understand what he means. She asks if he's talking about that primitive product from ancient times. Chun Yang awkwardly responds that it does sound a bit ancient now. Then he asks if it would be difficult to find someone who knows that kind of technology. Li Lu says she isn't sure either. She explains that even before the Great Cataclysm, people had already started using Intel brains instead of traditional computers. Then she suddenly remembers something. She tells him that there is a pre-cataclysm technical director in their camp who knows Intel brain technology very well. Excited, she grabs Chun Yang's hand and tells him to hurry, so she can take him to ask that person. Chun Yang quickly tells her he can walk on his own. Later, while the two of them are walking together, Chun Yang asks something he had been curious about for a while. He wonders why nobody in the settlement locks their doors. Li Lu explains that everyone here is poor as church mice, so there's nothing valuable worth stealing. She also says that survival in the wasteland depends heavily on unity. Anyone who steals or destroys that unity will be expelled from all the settlements once discovered. After walking a little farther, Li Lu says they've arrived and that the person they're looking for is inside. Just then they hear a strange voice from inside chanting happily about meat and how delicious it is. Suddenly, there's a loud explosion. Chun Yang reacts with disgust. Li Lu calmly calls out to Uncle Wei and says she needs to see him about something. A moment later, Uncle Wei comes out. He greets Li Lu and tells her she's lucky today because he just caught a fat one. He proudly introduces himself as a scientist. Then he says that once he finishes processing it, he'll share the 2 hind legs with her. Li Lu immediately gets excited and happily agrees. Chen Yang, however, is completely confused and asks what exactly they're talking about. When he takes a closer look, he realizes it's a giant gray rat and asks if it's some kind of mutated creature. Li Lu confirms that it is. She explains that besides zombies, this type of rat is the most common mutated creature in the wasteland. Adult ones can grow to about half a meter long, and they're also one of the main sources of meat for people here. After explaining that, Li Lu turns to Uncle Wei and says she actually came to introduce a job opportunity. She points to Chen Yang and says he's her current boss. She explains that he wants to hire some people and that the remuneration is very generous. Uncle Wei walks closer and looks Chen Yang up and down. Then he skeptically asks what kind of generous pay a young kid like him could possibly offer. He even wonders if Chen Yang might actually be a scammer. Chen Yang stretches out his hand and calmly says that he needs technical talent in the cerebral field. He explains that as long as someone can meet his requirements, the monthly pay will be 30 caddies of rice and flour plus 10 caddies of raw meat. Hearing this, Uncle Wei is stunned and asks if he really means rice and flour. Chen Yang confidently says of course he does. He even adds that if Uncle Wei is worried, he can advance the salary first. The scientist looks shocked and asks if he's serious. Li Lu quickly reassures him and says not to worry. She explains that as long as the boss nods, she can immediately give him the meat. Uncle Wei suddenly bursts into laughter and says that in that case, Mr. Chen has found the right person. He proudly claims that he is absolutely the person who understands Intel brains the best in District D. But Chen Yang shakes his head and says he misunderstood. What he wants to do actually has nothing to do with Intel brains. He then explains that he's talking about computers, the kind of personal computers people used in ancient times. What he really needs is someone who understands that kind of primitive technology. Hearing that, the scientist pauses in confusion and repeats the word computers. Uncle Wei scratches his head and says he has certainly heard of computers before, but in his opinion they are extremely primitive. He complains that their functions are limited and the interaction experience is terrible, so they basically have no value. Chen Yang cuts him off and says he only needs someone who understands the technology. He tells him to just answer whether he can do it or not. Uncle Wei immediately starts thinking to himself that he cannot give up the chance to get rice, flour, and raw meat every month. So he quickly changes his attitude and asks what specific kind of technology Chen Yang needs. Chen Yang explains that it's very simple. All he needs is someone who can use a computer to program and create software according to his requirements. Uncle Wei cautiously asks if that means he would have to handcraft 0.4 nanometer chips. Chen Yang immediately says there's no need for that. Uncle Wei then asks if he needs to design any super AI core algorithms. Chen Yang again says there's no need. Hearing that, Uncle Wei suddenly relaxes and confidently says there's absolutely no problem. He promises that as long as the hardware conditions allow it, he can complete all the programming requirements. However, he also points out that software created on computers cannot directly run on Intel brains. Because of that, he asks what Chen Yang plans to use it for. Chen Yang calmly tells him that he doesn't need to worry about that. He says a truly good employee simply completes the task perfectly without asking unnecessary questions. Uncle Wei quickly nods and says he understands completely. Chen Yang then says that's good. He tells him that he will solve the hardware problem himself. He also asks if Uncle Wei has any other requirements, adding that he definitely won't be lacking food. Uncle Wei thinks for a moment and says it would be best if he could also get an Intel brain to assist with the work. He explains that he could develop complex code on the Intel brain first and then transplant it to the computer, which would make the process much faster. He adds that even a low-spec model would be enough. Chen Yang nods and says he understands and will figure out a way. Li Lu then says they should get going. Uncle Wei waves goodbye and politely says goodbye to the boss. Later, outside, Chen Yang asks Li Lu whether Intel brains are easy to obtain. Li Lu explains that there aren't any in District D, but they can be bought in Grey Rat Town. The only problem is that they're a bit expensive. Chen Yang looks worried and asks if the food he brought today might not be enough to buy one. He wonders if Intel brains are really that expensive. Li Lu quickly shakes her head and says that they are expensive for people like them. But for Chen Yang, even buying 100 of them would be more than enough. Chen Yang asks if enhancement serums can also be bought in Grey Rat Town. Li Lu immediately replies that they can, but only Tier 1 and Tier 2 serums are available there. If someone wants higher tier serums, they need to go to the Doctors Association distribution point in the eastern region. Hearing that name, Chunyang asks what the Doctors Association is. Li Lu explains that it's one of the top factions in the wasteland. All enhancement serums and healing potions are developed by them. She looks a little surprised and asks if he really didn't know that. Chunyang quickly says that the organization he belongs to has always been self-sufficient, so he basically knows nothing about the outside world. Then he adds that since she's going to Grey Rat Town anyway, he also wants her to go to the Doctors Association and buy a batch of enhancement serums. Li Lu immediately agrees and says there's no problem. Chunyang tells her that he'll return to his own world first to get a computer for Uncle Wei. The rest of the work will be left to her. Li Lu nods and says she understands. Before leaving, Chunyang gives her one more instruction. He tells her that if she encounters danger during trading, she should abandon the food if necessary and prioritize her own safety. Li Lu falls silent for a moment before quietly saying that she understands. Later, as the sun sets, Chunyang returns to his room in the present world. Thinking about the deal he just made, he says that paying 30 caddies of rice and flour plus 10 caddies of raw meat is basically hiring a technical director for less than 400 yuan a month. To him, the wasteland really feels like a gold mine of opportunities. He stretches and jokingly says that ordinary people like him are truly living happily now. Just then, he notices Zhou Dandan lying nearby, scrolling on her phone while thinking about what she should order on Pinduoduo for dinner. Seeing her relaxed pose makes Chunyang feel a little awkward, though he secretly finds it amusing. Suddenly, Dandan notices him and becomes flustered. She quickly sits up and tells him to stop staring. Confused, she asks why he's at home because she looked in his bedroom earlier and there was clearly no one there. Chunyang casually says he's been home the whole time and suggests she might have remembered wrong. Then he says he has something to do and needs to go out, but promises to treat her to dinner tonight. With that, he quickly rushes out the door. After he leaves, Dan sighs and mutters to herself that men are all big pig trotters. Later outside, Chunyang remembers that Su Yen failed her audition earlier. He recalls that she sometimes works part-time at Computer City, so he decides to go there and buy a computer from her. When he arrives, he sees Su Yen working at the reception desk. At that moment, a man walks up to her and starts talking in a suggestive tone. He asks if she has reconsidered his proposal and says that as long as she agrees, he'll pick up the goods tomorrow. Su Yen immediately shuts him down. She calmly tells him that they sell computers there and do not provide the kind of service he's implying. Chunyang gestures and calls out to the sales associate, asking if she can come over for a second because he has some questions. Su Yen quickly walks over and whispers that thank goodness he showed up because she was about to be annoyed to death by that damn fatty. Chunyang asks if the guy was bargaining too aggressively. Su Yen says not at all. She explains that he's building a Buyuan computer but keeps insisting that she go drink with him tonight. She then asks Chunyang if she really looks like the kind of person who would agree to something like that. Then she asks what he actually came for and jokes that he didn't come just to watch her make a fool of herself. Chunyang says he came to build a computer, of course. He reminds her that he told her earlier he was starting a game company. He then asks her to help him assemble a top-spec desktop computer. He specifically tells her to install the newest and most expensive graphics card and all the best components. Su Yen is surprised and says the highest spec computer in the shop costs around 100,000 yuan. She reminds him that he's opening a company, not just playing games himself, and asks why he needs something that expensive. Chunyang explains that he needs a high-spec machine to test the software's load limits. Su Yen nods and tells him to wait there for a moment while she goes to get the equipment. While she goes inside, the fat man who was bothering her earlier walks over again. He mutters to himself that he must get that girl today. Then he asks Chunyang what he's planning to buy and what his budget is. Chunyang simply points to a computer labeled 100,000 yuan and says that's the one they're buying. The fat man is completely stunned and asks if he's serious about buying the top-spec machine. Just then Su Yen comes back carrying the packaged computer and says his order is ready. She tells him the total is 130,000 yuan and asks how he would like to pay. Seeing the transaction actually happening, the fat man is completely shocked and asks if this is really real. Chunyang then looks at him and jokingly asks if he still wants him to go drink with him. The fat man immediately backs off and runs away, saying there's no way. Meanwhile, back in Grey Rat Town, Li Lu is walking through the streets with a large backpack. Some people nearby begin watching her. One man approaches her and asks if she wants to hang out and have some fun together. Li Lu bluntly says she's not interested, but the man keeps moving closer and whispers to his companions that her backpack looks very full, which probably means she's carrying something valuable. Li Lu immediately tells him to get lost. She pulls out her gun slightly and warns him that if he doesn't back off, she won't hesitate to get rough. The man who approached Li Lu backs off when he sees the gun, but one of the others mutters in surprise that she's actually carrying a weapon. Li Lu continues walking forward while keeping her composure. Inside, she keeps reminding herself to stay calm. She knows she absolutely cannot show even the slightest weakness, because if she does, that pack of hyenas will rush at her immediately and tear her apart. After a while, she arrives at a wasteland repair shop. She walks up to the counter and says she wants to buy an Intel brain. The man at the counter tells her that the basic model costs 15 kilograms of gray rat meat, and if she wants an additional plug-in module, that will cost another 5 kilograms. Li Lu calmly says she will just take the basic model. The man checks the goods she brought and says the weight is sufficient. He hands her the Intel brain and places it into her bag. Before she leaves, he asks if she wants to trade for anything else, saying he has plenty of treasures available. Li Lu simply says there's no need. After she walks away, one of the men nearby asks if they should follow her. Another one shakes his head and says it's not worth the trouble. As Li Lu keeps moving through the streets, she quietly lets out a sigh of relief. In her mind, she thinks that was close. She nearly got exposed earlier. If those people had seen the cabbage she's carrying, the entire settlement would have gone crazy. After traveling a bit farther, she finally reaches another location. Standing at the entrance, she says she has finally arrived. A person inside greets her and tells her to look around for whatever she wants. Inside the shop, many different serums are displayed. There are Mongu serums, Steel serums, Bull serums, Tier 1 enhancement serums, Tier 2 enhancement serums, and even Tier 3 enhancement serums. But after looking at all of them, Li Lu calmly says that these are still too basic. She says she wants higher grade serums. The shopkeeper laughs and tells her that the price of high grade serums isn't something a little girl like her can afford. Without saying another word, Li Lu slowly takes out the cabbage and shows it to him. The moment the man sees it, his eyes widen in shock as he realizes what it is. The man suddenly rushes past Li Lu, moving so fast that even she is surprised. She immediately turns around and says he's incredibly fast. Instinctively, she pulls out her weapon and points it at him, demanding to know what he's doing. The man calmly tells her not to worry because he has no ill intentions. He adds that if he really wanted to rob her, that broken gun of hers wouldn't stand a chance against a Tier 9 enhanced human. Li Lu is stunned and asks if he just said Tier 9 enhancement. She says she can't believe it and asks why the Doctors Association would assign a Tier 9 distributor to a remote place like Grey Rat Town. The man shrugs and replies that in the wasteland, nothing is impossible. Then he politely asks if he can take a closer look at the cabbage. Li Lu hesitates for a moment but eventually hands it over. The moment the man holds it, he becomes almost frantic with excitement. He carefully examines it and says the freshness and color are unbelievable. He realizes it's a completely fresh Chinese cabbage that hasn't been contaminated by radiation at all. He calls it a miracle and says it's like seeing a miracle with his own eyes. Li Lu then tells him that if he wants it, he should exchange it for serums of equal value. The man immediately warns her not to try asking for an outrageous price just because of the opportunity. Li Lu calmly replies that the soil in the wasteland can't grow vegetables anymore, so he should understand the value of something like this. The man nods and says he does understand that its value comes from its rarity. However, he also says he doesn't want his trading partner to be an opportunistic villain. Li Lu reassures him that she has enough sincerity to complete the deal fairly. Hearing that, the man agrees and presses a button. A hidden compartment opens, revealing several items. He says he will also show his sincerity. He presents a complete set of enhancement serums from Tier 1 to Tier 6, along with a healing potion capable of curing diseases caused by cellular mutation. Then he points to the main attraction, a brand new carbon fiber bio-warmer armor. Li Lu looks shocked and asks if all of those items are hers. The man immediately says of course not. He tells her she can only choose 2 items, and he tosses them in front of her. Confused, Li Lu asks why he bothered introducing the armor if she can't take it. The man smiles and says it's naturally for their second transaction. He presses the button again and the display disappears. Then he tells her that if she wants that armor, she'll have to bring more Chinese cabbage or other vegetables next time. Hearing that, Li Lu suddenly becomes suspicious and wonders how he knew she had access to other vegetables. The man explains that the Chinese cabbage is so perfect that it clearly isn't some accidental product. In his opinion, a faction that has mastered vegetable planting technology wouldn't just grow a single cabbage. Li Lu quickly replies that it wasn't grown at all. She claims she simply found it by chance in a ruin that existed before the Great Cataclysm. The man smiles and says that even if such a ruin really exists, it wouldn't preserve only one cabbage. He tells her to hurry back and discuss it with her companions. He adds that for people living in the wasteland, vegetables are surely less useful than a powerful suit of armor. Li Lu thinks for a moment and finally agrees. She tells him to keep the armor safe because she will return as soon as possible. After she leaves, the man mutters to himself that although he was exiled to this godforsaken place because he lost a power struggle, it might actually turn out to be a blessing in disguise if he can obtain such precious vegetables. Meanwhile, back in the modern world, Chun Yang is standing near a truck in front of a supermarket. One of the workers unloading the cargo tells Mr. Chun that his goods have arrived and asks where they should unload everything. Chun Yang casually tells them to place it in the nearby storage area. As the workers carry the boxes, one of them quietly comments that the meat alone is worth more than 20,000 yuan and wonders why someone would buy so much at once. The other worker tells him it's none of his business and that he should just focus on doing his job. After finishing the delivery, the worker tells Chun Yang that if he needs anything else, he can contact them anytime. Then they drive away in the truck. Chun Yang looks around the empty alley and says he's lucky that there's usually no one there and no surveillance cameras. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know where to store such a large amount of goods. Once he's sure the coast is clear, he activates his ring and stores everything inside it in one go. But then he starts thinking more seriously about the situation. He realizes this method isn't a long-term solution. With such huge quantities of supplies, sooner or later someone will run into him while he's doing this. He even jokes to himself that if he somehow ends up trending online again, he'll be completely exposed, down to the last detail. After thinking it over carefully, Chun Yang decides that as a temporary solution it would be better to rent a private factory building. He also considers finding a food factory to cooperate with. That way, not only would he have a proper place to store supplies, but he could also greatly increase the variety of food he brings to the wasteland. Chun Yang thinks to himself that just as he expected, the storage space inside the ring is in a state of absolute stasis. No matter how much fresh food he stores inside, he doesn't have to worry about it spoiling. To test it out, he takes out a nice ice cream and eats it. While he's enjoying it, he suddenly receives a phone call. The voice on the other end informs him that the registration process for Chun Yang Technology Company Limited has been completed. Chun Yang calmly replies that he understands. After hanging up, he smiles and says that from now on, his career has officially begun. Later, when he returns home, he announces that he's back. Dan immediately asks where he went earlier since he left in such a hurry. She jokingly asks if he went out for a job interview. Chun Yang tells her he forgot to mention something earlier. He explains that he opened a company himself, so he doesn't need to look for a job anymore. Dan looks at him suspiciously and says he doesn't think she's as easy to fool as a 3-year-old. Does he? Chun Yang insists he's not lying and repeats that his hometown recently got demolished. Hearing that, Dan suddenly understands. She says that explains why he was suddenly generous enough to treat them to dinner at that expensive restaurant the night before. She jokes that he must have been showered with demolition money. She sighs and says he's really lucky. Her family lives in a small county town, so even if their place were demolished, they wouldn't get much money. Then she notices something strange and asks why he's covering his nose. Chun Yang casually changes the topic and asks how much her salary is now. Dan replies that her take-home pay is only a little over 5,000 yuan a month. She jokes that if the company didn't provide meals, she would have starved to death on the streets a long time ago. She dramatically collapses onto the couch and sighs, wondering when the heavens will finally open their eyes and let people like them experience the feeling of getting rich overnight. Chun Yang laughs and says getting rich overnight might be impossible, but then he offers her something else. He asks if she wants to consider joining his company. He says he can give her triple her current salary, 15,000 yuan a month. Dan immediately starts calculating in her head. She realizes that if she saves carefully, she could save nearly 100,000 yuan in a year. Excited by the thought, she imagines being able to eat hot pot whenever she wants and buy new bags whenever she feels like it. Chun Yang smiles and asks if that means she agrees. Dan says she hasn't agreed yet. She explains that what if his company goes bankrupt in just a few days. She tells him to explain the company's situation first, and she'll make a decision after judging it. As she speaks, She even takes out a pen and starts writing notes. Chun-young explains that the company was just registered today with a capital of 1 million yuan. He adds that the company will mainly focus on PC and mobile games. Dan nods while writing, but then says the company sounds pretty unreliable so far. She points out that aside from having money, it doesn't seem to have anything else yet. She asks whether a game company shouldn't have a development roadmap and a technical team. Chun-young confidently tells her not to worry, because that is exactly where their company's greatest competitive advantage lies. Dan continues thinking like a professional and says that the most important task right now is to find a suitable office building. She also says they'll need to arrange licenses and various applications. Just as she finishes talking, she grabs her bag and prepares to head out. Chun-young asks where she's going. Dan casually replies that she's obviously going to resign. Hearing that, Chun-young feels a little emotional. In his mind, he realizes she's actually supporting him with her actions. A moment later, Chun-yang's phone suddenly rings. He answers it, listens for a moment, and then says he understands and that he'll leave immediately. Dan notices his expression turning pale and asks if something happened. Chun-young explains that his grandfather has always had poor health, and recently he was diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctor said he might only have about a month left to live, so Chun-young has to return home to see him one last time. Chun-young thanks Dan sincerely. Dan tells him there's no need to be so formal since they're roommates. She urges him to hurry back home. Chun-young quickly starts packing his things, determined to leave as soon as possible. As he heads out, he thinks to himself that he absolutely cannot let his grandfather leave like that. He remembers the enhancement serums from the apocalypse world and realizes there might be a way to save him. With that thought firmly in his mind, he walks out the door, determined to find a solution. At the Dahang Bullet train station, the place is packed with people. Chun-young is there as well, waiting among the crowd. Suddenly a woman spots him and calls out his name, asking if he is Chun-young. Chun-young turns around, recognizes her, and asks if she is Zhu Run. Zhu Run smiles and says it really is him. She says she didn't expect to run into an old classmate there. Thinking about it, she mentions that they haven't seen each other for 7 years. Then she asks if he's heading back to Wang'ai City. Chun-young says yes. At that moment, a station announcement plays, informing passengers that ticket checking for their train is about to begin. Chun-young suggests that they walk and talk. Zhu Run agrees. As they head toward the gate, Zhu Run asks where his seat is. She says she might try switching seats with the person next to him so they can sit together. Chun-young checks his ticket and explains that because he bought the ticket in a hurry, only business class seats were left. Zhu Run says that in that case they can just talk after arriving in Wang'ai. But Chun-young tells her there's no need because he has another idea. Zhu Run looks confused and asks what he means. Chun-young asks her to wait for a moment and walks over to a nearby staff member. He politely asks if there are any empty seats in business class. The staff member checks and says yes. She explains that out of the 4 business class seats in his row, only his ticket has been sold. Chun-young asks her to change Zhu Run's ticket to the seat next to his and says he will cover the cost. Zhu Run is stunned when she hears this and can only say wow. The staff member processes the change and hands Zhu Run the new ticket, asking her to keep it safe. Overjoyed, Zhu Run immediately runs over and hugs Chun-young, thanking him excitedly. Chun-young gets a little flustered by the sudden hug. Zhu Run notices and asks what's wrong. Chun-young awkwardly says it's nothing and tells her she's welcome. Later, inside the train, Zhu Run looks around curiously and says it's her first time sitting in business class. She comments that it really is much more spacious than the regular carriages. Then she asks Chun-young something she's been wondering about. She remembers that he was already working in Dahang and asks why he suddenly decided to go back to Wang'ai. Chun-young explains that his grandfather is sick. Zhu Run gently places a hand on his shoulder and tells him not to worry too much. She says that medical science is very advanced now, so his grandfather will surely be cured. Chun-young nods. Then he asks why she came to Dahang. Zhu Run explains that she came to promote her father's factory and drum up business. Chun-young remembers something and says he recalls that her father runs a food factory. Zhu Run says that's right. Her father does run a food factory. But unfortunately, in the past 2 years things have been really difficult. Most people now only trust big brands when buying food products, so small factories like theirs are struggling. She explains that the business has been constantly losing money and they can barely afford to pay the workers' wages. Hearing this, Chun-Yang secretly thinks this might actually be perfect. He had already been looking for a food supplier for long-term cooperation. Not only could this help an old classmate, but it would also allow him to steadily strengthen his wasteland team. So he tells Zhu Run that he might actually be able to help her. She looks surprised and asks how he could help. Chun-Yang explains that he just happens to be looking for a food factory to partner with and sign a long-term supply contract. Zhu Run is shocked and asks if he's serious. Chun-Yang says of course he is, but he will need to visit the factory and inspect it first. Zhu Run says that's no problem, but she's still curious. She reminds him that they both just graduated from university not long ago, so she wonders why he suddenly has such a large order demand. Chun-Yang casually explains that he recently started his own company and that his business partners happen to need food supplies. Zhu Run immediately suggests that they exchange contact information. Chun-Yang agrees without hesitation. After they add each other, they later get into a taxi together. Chun-Yang says he needs to visit his grandfather first, so the factory inspection will probably have to wait a couple of days. Zhu Run says that's fine. When the taxi stops, Chun-Yang gets out and leaves. Zhu Run waves and says goodbye. In her mind, she thinks it's surprising that she ran into Chun-Yang after so many years and that he even offered to help her. She wonders if this reunion might be fate. Just then, another car pulls up and a man calls her name, telling her to come over. Zhu Run replies that she's coming. The man is her father. After she gets into the car, her father asks how the partnership talks went this time. Zhu Run says there is one piece of bad news and one piece of good news. Her father asks about the bad news first. She explains that she didn't manage to find any business partners in Dahang. Her father sighs and then asks what the good news is. Zhu Run says the good news is that she ran into an old classmate named Chun-Yang on the train. She explains that he happens to have a large order and plans to visit their factory for an inspection in a few days. However, her father immediately becomes cautious. He says that when it comes to an old classmate suddenly offering big business, it might just be a scam, and she needs to be careful. At Wang'ai City People's Hospital, Chun-Yang arrives and someone greets him. His father walks out and says Xiaoyang is finally back. Chun-Yang immediately asks how his grandfather's condition is. His father says that the old man just took his medicine and fell asleep. He tells Chun-Yang to go rest for a while and says he'll call him when his grandfather wakes up. Chun-Yang nods and says he understands. After that, he walks into the bathroom. Standing there alone, he clenches his fists and thinks that he must hurry. No matter what, he has to find medicine that can cure his grandfather. Without wasting any time, he activates the ring and travels to the wasteland world. He appears again in Grey Rat District D. Looking around, he wonders what he should do if Li Lu isn't there. He briefly considers going to Uncle Wei instead but hesitates, wondering if he can fully trust him. In the end, he decides to go straight to Li Lu's house. He calls out her name and asks if she's there. As he pushes the door open and starts walking inside, he suddenly sees something unexpected. Shocked, he immediately steps back out and stammers awkwardly that he'll come back later to talk. After a while, the two meet again. Li Lu asks what the boss is looking for in such a hurry. Chun-Yang quickly asks her an important question. He wants to know whether, with the current medical technology in their world, even terminal cancer is no longer considered an incurable disease. Li Lu says of course it isn't. She explains that during the Great Cataclysm, the Earth became filled with radiation, and cancer became even more common than catching a cold. If it couldn't be cured, humanity would have gone extinct a long time ago. Chun-Yang then asks about the cure rate. Li Lu thinks for a moment and says that about 100 years ago, the cure rate of the specific medicine was already around 95%. But after the apocalypse began, nobody really had the time to keep statistics anymore. Hearing this, Chun-Yang feels relieved and says it's a good thing his guess was correct. Then he asks whether this specific medicine can be purchased in Grey Rat Town. Li Lu shakes her head and says not really. Chun-Yang's expression immediately becomes disappointed. But Li Lu quickly adds that the cellular disease serum produced by the Doctors Association also has the effect of treating cancer. The moment Chun-Yang hears that, he becomes determined again and tells her to take him to the Doctors Association immediately. Li Lu quickly tells him to wait a moment. Chun-Yang impatiently asks what they're waiting for because he needs to get that serum as soon as possible. Li Lu suddenly takes out a serum and hands it to him, saying she already exchanged for one. Chun-Yang's face lights up with excitement. He asks where it came from and wonders if she went to the Doctors Association. Li Lu nods and says yes. She explains that since the boss told her earlier that she needed to increase her strength as quickly as possible, she went to the Doctors Association and made a trade using a cabbage. Chunyang is stunned and asks if she really exchanged just one cabbage for that serum. Li Lu quickly shakes her head and says no, that serum was only a bonus. Then she tells him to follow her. She opens a bag and reveals a large collection of items inside. Li Lu proudly says that this is everything she got, a full set of Tier 1 to Tier 6 enhancement serums. Chunyang repeats the words Tier 1 to Tier 6 enhancement serums in disbelief. However, the way he reacts makes Li Lu nervous. She thinks that the boss must be unhappy because she didn't exchange enough. After all, vegetables like cabbage are incredibly precious in the wasteland. But instead of being angry, Chunyang suddenly starts happily juggling the serums in excitement. In his mind, he can hardly believe it. To him, this deal was basically done at the price of a single cabbage. He even thinks the Doctors Association must have acted like they had never seen vegetables before. Laughing to himself, he realizes he has now achieved what he calls serum freedom. Li Lu watches him quietly and asks why he hasn't said anything. She worries that maybe he thinks she made a bad trade. Chunyang quickly grabs the bag and tells her that a loss is impossible. In fact, they made a massive profit this time. He excitedly tells her that she's basically his lucky star and even lifts her up in excitement. Li Lu becomes happy as well and says that as long as she can help the boss, she's satisfied. Chunyang tells Li Lu to remember one thing: they should stick to this price. From now on, they should trade for as many serums as the other side is willing to offer. Li Lu says that works out perfectly because the distributor also expressed interest in continuing to trade with them. Chunyang asks her to tell him more about that distributor's situation. After hearing everything, Chunyang slowly processes the information. Looking thoughtful, he says he understands now and confirms that the man is a Tier 9 enhanced human. Li Lu then says that if the boss thinks the risk is too high, they can always find someone else to trade with. But Chunyang shakes his head and says there's no need. Based on what she described, this man, Jinyan, actually seems like a very good partner. Li Lu asks why he thinks so. Chunyang explains that the man has 3 major advantages, and they happen to be exactly what they need. First, as a Tier 9 enhanced human, Jinyan has a much higher clearance level. That means he has access to better channels for trading higher-end goods, like the biological armor she mentioned earlier. Second, his goal is very clear. He wants to fight his way back into the core power circle of the Doctors Association. To do that, he'll need a large amount of resources, which means their cooperation could last a long time. Li Lu nods and says that actually makes a lot of sense. Then Chunyang mentions the third point. He says the third reason is very simple. Jinyan is a smart man. Li Lu looks confused and asks what he means. Chunyang explains that Jinyan could immediately tell that she wasn't the one truly in charge. Yet he didn't try to pressure her into making a deal right away. Li Lu lowers her head and says that was her fault. She admits she lacks experience and accidentally exposed a flaw. But Chunyang gently lifts her head and wipes away the tears in her eyes. He tells her not to feel discouraged because she already did very well. Li Lu smiles and thanks him. Chunyang then picks up the suitcase full of serums and says he'll take them for now. The rest of the discussion can wait until tomorrow. Just as he's about to leave, Li Lu suddenly stops him and warns him that he can't inject another serum right now. Chunyang asks why. Li Lu explains that there must be a certain time interval between each tier of enhancement serum. Normally, between Tier 1 and Tier 2 injections, there should be about a 3-day gap. Between Tier 2 and Tier 3, the interval should be more than a week. Chunyang asks if injecting them too quickly would cause side effects. Li Lu says of course it would. She explains that the body needs time to fully absorb the previous serum before taking the next one. Otherwise, the body simply won't be able to handle the strain and could break down. Chunyang is shocked when he hears this. He asks what she means and wonders how he's supposed to know when the serum has been completely absorbed. Li Lu explains that the person who injected the serum will naturally feel it. She says the body will give a very clear sense when the absorption is complete, so he'll understand when the time comes. Chunyang nods and says he understands. He tells her he'll see her tomorrow. Li Lu replies goodbye, boss. Soon after, Chunyang returns to the modern world, back at Wongai City People's Hospital. He appears again inside the bathroom stall. Holding the bag of serums, he feels extremely excited. He thinks the whole process went much smoother than he expected. To him, the wasteland world really is a treasure trove. He looks at the serum and thinks that with this healing agent, his grandfather will definitely get better. Meanwhile, In another part of the hospital, a doctor is speaking with Chun Yang's father. The doctor says she is giving this advice based on the actual medical situation and asks Mr. Chun to consider it carefully. Chun Yang's father quietly says he will think about it. Just as the doctor finishes speaking and prepares to leave, Chun Yang walks in and notices her. He wonders if she is his grandfather's attending physician. Chun Yang immediately turns to his father and asks what the doctor just said. His father sighs and explains that the doctor suggested transferring his grandfather to hospice care. Chun Yang is confused and asks what hospice care means. His father explains that it means processing the discharge paperwork and sending his grandfather home with medication to make his final days a little more comfortable. Hearing this, Chun Yang is horrified. He says that basically means telling his grandfather to go home and wait to die. Father explains that the cancer has already spread throughout his body. Even the most expensive treatments would only buy him another 2 months at best. Dr. Han already knows they're just an ordinary family and can't possibly afford those costs, which is why she suggested they start the discharge process. Hearing that, Chun Yang quietly says he understands. A moment later, his father tells him they should go see his grandfather first before handling the paperwork. Chun Yang agrees and follows him inside. When they enter the ward, his grandfather is still lying there looking seriously ill. The old man weakly calls out Chun Yang's name, and Chun Yang immediately responds that he's here. Then Chun Yang's father excuses himself, saying he'll go ask about the discharge paperwork and leave the grandfather and grandson alone for a while. Even as he walks away, there are tears in his eyes. And honestly, seeing your own father trying not to cry hits a little different. As soon as they're alone, Chun Yang thinks about how lucky he is that regular wards don't have surveillance cameras. Yeah, that thought alone tells you he's about to do something crazy. He immediately takes out the mysterious serum and tells his grandfather that he has a special medicine that can cure him. Then he asks if he's willing to try it. The old man is obviously nervous after seeing the syringe. But then he thinks about how his condition can't really get any worse anyway. In his mind, Chun Yang is simply trying to show his filial piety one last time, so he decides to trust him. And just like that, he allows Chun Yang to inject the serum. The moment the medicine enters his body, something starts happening. Meanwhile, Chun Yang can only stare and silently pray for it to work, because if this thing fails, he just injected his dying grandfather with a mystery potion from who knows where. A little while later, something unbelievable happens. Grandfather suddenly sits up. Chun Yang immediately rushes over and asks if he's okay and whether he feels uncomfortable anywhere. Instead, the old man practically jumps with excitement as he says that his body suddenly feels light. All the pain, weakness, and sickness seem to have disappeared. At that moment, Chun Yang finally lets out a sigh of relief. The serum worked. It actually worked. The guy basically watched a terminal cancer patient hit the reset button on his body. But even after recovering, grandfather immediately thinks of something else. He points out that such a miraculous medicine could bring Chun Yang enormous trouble. If a dying person can be pulled back from death's door like this, then once word spreads, every terminally ill patient in the country would probably come looking for him. And honestly, he's not wrong. Chun Yang reassures him not to worry. He says that as long as they insist it was simply a medical miracle, everything will be fine. Besides, nobody knows the serum exists except the two of them. Hearing that, grandfather finally relaxes. He gives Chun Yang a thumbs up and promises that he won't tell anyone. With that settled, Chun Yang tells him to get some rest while he goes to call a doctor for a checkup. And that's where things get interesting, because imagine being the doctor who just approved discharge papers for a dying cancer patient, only to find him looking healthier a few hours later. Meanwhile, outside the ward, Chun Yang finally starts thinking about the bigger picture. Even though the recovery serum successfully saved his grandfather, he realizes he still can't sell something like this in the real world. After all, he doesn't even understand the serum's principles or how it's produced. More importantly, he can't guarantee a stable supply. And if the secret of his transmigration ever gets exposed, things could get very messy very fast. As he's thinking about all this, he notices a faint glow coming from the ring on his hand. That immediately reminds him of something important. The ring is irreplaceable. He isn't. If someone discovers his secret, they'll come after him, not the ring sitting quietly on his finger. Because of that, he decides he needs to improve his ability to protect himself as soon as possible before some future crisis catches him unprepared. But before worrying about future enemies, he has another problem to deal with. He heads straight to the reception desk and urgently tells the nurse to quickly check on his grandfather, Chun Jianjun, in bed 43 because he can suddenly sit up. The nurse is obviously confused. She pulls up the medical records and starts reading them out loud. According to the file, Chun Jianjun is a 69-year-old male with terminal liver cancer. The cancer has already spread throughout his entire body, and he's completely lost the ability to function independently. After hearing that, Chun Yang insists that everything he's saying is true. The nurse isn't buying it at all. She basically suggests that maybe he's been caring for a sick family member for so long that he started hallucinating. Honestly, from her perspective, that's probably more believable than a terminal cancer patient randomly standing up. But Chun Yang doesn't waste time arguing. He practically drags the nurse toward the room and tells her she'll understand once she sees it herself. Then the two of them arrive at the ward, and what they see completely shatters the nurse's worldview. Grandfather is casually taking a walk around the room. A walk. This is the same man whose medical file basically described him as one step away from the grave. Seeing Chun Yang enter, grandfather casually asks what the doctor said. Meanwhile, the nurse is standing there looking like her brain just blue-screened. She blurts out in shocked reaction before immediately turning around and sprinting out of the room. She says she's gonna call Dr. Han over right now. The moment she leaves, Chun Yang finally lets out the words he's been wanting to say. It worked, and grandfather, equally excited, agrees that it really worked. A few moments later, hurried footsteps can be heard approaching the ward. Dr. Han rushes in and immediately asks where the patient is, and considering what she's about to see, her reaction might be even better than the nurse's. The moment Dr. Han arrives, she immediately begins examining the patient for herself. At this point, Chun Yang's father is practically on edge. He asks how his dad's condition is looking. After checking him over, Dr. Han admits that, based on what she's seeing, old Master Chun is in extremely good condition. In fact, he's doing so well that even she finds it hard to believe. Hearing that, Chun Yang quickly asks if that means his grandfather has completely recovered. But Dr. Han isn't ready to jump to conclusions yet. She explains that they'll need to perform a much more comprehensive examination first and hopes the family will cooperate. Grandfather immediately agrees, saying he'll listen to Chun Yang's arrangements. With that settled, Dr. Han tells them to follow her. Then she casually drops another piece of good news. The hospital will cover all the examination fees. The moment Chun Yang's father hears that, he practically lights up and repeatedly thanks Dr. Han. Not gonna lie, after hearing the words free examination, that man probably became even happier than when he heard about the follow-up tests. A while later, the results finally come back. Everyone gathers around as Dr. Han studies the scans on her computer. Chun Yang's father nervously asks about the results. And then comes the bombshell. According to the CT scans, all of the tumors are gone. Every single one. Even the cancer cells that had spread throughout the body have completely disappeared. Just like that, the family is stunned. Meanwhile, grandfather is feeling better than ever. He proudly declares that he feels like he's suddenly become 20 years younger. The old man is so excited he's practically ready to run a marathon. Chun Yang immediately wishes his grandfather would calm down a little. His father also tells him not to get carried away since he only just recovered and should still be weak. But Dr. Han quickly stops them. She shows them the examination reports and explains that there is actually nothing to worry about. Not only has the cancer disappeared, but all of the old man's age-related illnesses have vanished as well. According to the reports, he is now in exceptionally good health. At this point, even Dr. Han sounds shocked by what she's reading. Because let's be honest, she probably went from expecting a hospice patient to looking at the health report of someone preparing for retirement vacations. Hearing this, Chun Yang's father immediately asks the most important question. Can his dad finally be discharged? Dr. Han confirms that he can, but there is one condition. The moment she says, but everyone gets nervous again, she explains that this kind of recovery is unbelievably rare, so she intends to continue monitoring the situation. She'll regularly contact them and follow up on old Master Chen's condition. The father immediately agrees and promises that the family will fully cooperate. Grandfather is also in a fantastic mood. He even warmly invites Dr. Han to visit their house whenever she has free time. Dr. Han then schedules a follow-up examination 1 week later. If everything remains normal, the family can completely relax. Everyone agrees. Meanwhile, grandfather is still enthusiastically reminding Dr. Han not to forget to visit their house. At this point, Chun Yang is practically begging his grandfather to stop talking before he accidentally says something embarrassing. Unfortunately, the old man is just getting started. As the family leaves the hospital, grandfather suddenly looks at Dr. Han and asks Chun Yang, whether she would make a good granddaughter-in-law. And just like that, the man who survived terminal cancer immediately starts focusing on his grandson's marriage. Some things really never change. Chun-Yong instantly shuts the idea down and asks what kind of nonsense he's talking about. But judging by the look on grandfather's face, he's absolutely serious. And somehow, I have a feeling this won't be the last time he brings it up. As Chun-Yong and his family leave the hospital, Dr. Han can't stop thinking about what just happened. The more she thinks about it, the stranger it becomes. In her mind, Chun-Yong is definitely hiding some kind of secret. After returning to her office, she starts comparing cases. Chun Jianjun's condition was actually worse than old Master Chu's had been, yet somehow he completely recovered. The more she analyzes the situation, the more suspicious it looks, and that's when her thoughts drift toward a certain person. Meanwhile, over at the Chu family estate, several people are busy moving around when a young woman receives a phone call. She's in the middle of rushing to a company meeting and casually tells the caller that she doesn't really have time to chat right now. On the other end of the line, Dr. Han immediately drops a bombshell. She tells her that a patient with terminal liver cancer completely recovered today without any warning signs beforehand. That instantly gets her attention. She stops and asks if Dr. Han means a complete recovery. Dr. Han confirms it. Not only are the patient's examination results completely normal, but every trace of cancer cells has vanished from his body. The moment she hears that, her expression changes. Immediately, she tells her assistant to postpone the company meeting. The assistant is obviously surprised, but when the president gives an order, nobody argues. At this point, the meeting is no longer important. A terminal cancer patient coming back from the brink of death? Now that's important. She quickly asks what medicine the patient used and what treatment he received. But Dr. Han gives an answer she wasn't expecting. According to everything she can verify, the recovery had absolutely nothing to do with any treatment plan. Now her curiosity goes through the roof. She asks Dr. Han to send over the patient's complete information and treatment records. Dr. Han agrees, but warns her not to get her hopes up. She doesn't think the records will reveal much. Naturally, that only makes the situation even more suspicious. The Chu family president asks why she thinks that, and Dr. Han reveals the detail that has been bothering her this entire time. She explains that she had already issued a critical condition notice for the patient. The man was basically at death's door. Yet, on the very day his grandson came to visit him, he suddenly recovered without any explanation. Yet, when you put it like that, the timing is way too convenient. Dr. Han then tells her that if she really wants answers, investigating the grandson directly would probably be much faster. The Chu family president immediately focuses on that detail. The patient's grandson? Dr. Han confirms it. She tells her that the young man's name is Chun-Yong and suggests investigating him privately. The moment she hears the name, she repeats it to herself. Chun-Yong. Then she calmly says she's memorized it. And just like that, Chun-Yong has no idea that one miraculous hospital visit has already attracted the attention of another powerful figure. Because when rich and influential people start investigating you, things usually get complicated very quickly. Before sunrise, Chun-Yong is already preparing to head out again. His father notices and asks where he's going so early when he hasn't even eaten breakfast yet. Chun-Yong quickly comes up with an excuse, saying he's in a hurry to meet an old classmate. His father reminds him not to stay out too long because the family is holding a banquet tonight to celebrate grandfather being discharged from the hospital. Chun-Yong tells him not to worry and says he'll be back in time. After leaving the house, he heads deep into a narrow alleyway. As he walks, he starts looking around carefully. No surveillance cameras. Very few pedestrians. Perfect. He thinks this place is ideal for teleporting without attracting attention. Then he can't help laughing to himself. After all, he's been using Li Lu and Uncle Wei as his imaginary old classmates every time he needs an excuse. At this point, those two are probably unknowingly carrying his entire social life. With nobody around to witness it, Chun-Yong activates the ring. Instantly, energy begins swirling around him, and just like that, he disappears. Meanwhile, in the wasteland world, Li Lu is happily enjoying a special snack. The food is so good that she's completely focused on eating until she notices Chun-Yong finally arriving. She immediately asks whether the urgent matters he mentioned before have been taken care of. Chun-Yong gets straight to business. He explains that the recovery serum performed extremely well. He has already discussed things with the organization behind him, and they've decided to deepen cooperation with the doctor's Soldiers Association. Then he issues a new order. The biological armor must become the top priority. As for the remaining vegetables, trade all of them for enhancement serums. Every single one. Li Lu nearly chokes after hearing that. She asks if he really means all of them. After all, enhancement serums can only be used once per person. Buying so many at once seems excessive, but Chen Yang isn't concerned. He explains that the serums won't just be used by the two of them anymore. The organization has decided to establish a branch base in this area. The moment Li Lu hears that, she's shocked. A real branch base? Here? Then she quickly points out the dangers. The region is filled with zombies, mutants, and hostile factions. This definitely isn't the safest place to build a foothold. But Chen Yang has already made up his mind. He reveals that he plans to establish an operational base using Grey Rat District D as the foundation. Before moving forward, though, he asks the most important question. Can the people here be trusted? Li Lu thinks for a moment before answering honestly. Compared to residents of larger settlements, the people of District D are weaker. However, they're united, and more importantly, they're trustworthy. For Chen Yang, that's exactly the answer he wanted. He explains that strength isn't really a problem. Strength can be increased through enhancement serums. Character is much harder to find. Then he casually drops another insane statement. His goal is to raise every member of the base to at least tier 4. Not just the elites, everyone. And as for important personnel like Li Lu, he plans to push them to tier 5 or even higher. The moment those words leave his mouth, Li Lu freezes. She's completely stunned. Seriously, the way Chen Yang talks about enhancement serums is starting to sound like someone discussing bulk groceries. She can barely believe what she just heard. Chen Yang notices her reaction and immediately asks if something is wrong. Is it impossible to obtain that many serums? But Li Lu quickly shakes her head. That's not the issue at all. In fact, the problem is much worse. She explains that if everyone in District D suddenly reaches tier 4, a much more serious crisis will appear. A crisis so severe that it could potentially destroy the entire district. Then she asks Chen Yang a strange question. After injecting the enhancement serum, did he notice his appetite becoming much larger? And just from that question alone, you can already tell there's a huge catch hidden behind these power-ups. Chen Yang immediately realizes she's right. Thinking back, he admits that he really has been eating a lot more than before. By his estimate, he's probably consuming 3 or 4 times as much food as he used to. Li Lu then explains the hidden drawback of enhancement serums. While the serum strengthens cells and dramatically boosts a person's physical abilities, it also massively increases energy consumption. In other words, power isn't free. The stronger you become, the more fuel your body needs. Chen Yang quickly understands the problem. If the number of evolvers in District D keeps increasing, then food consumption will skyrocket right alongside them. But Li Lu isn't finished yet. She explains that appetite grows progressively with each enhancement tier. An ordinary person might only need about half a kilogram of food per day. Chen Yang, after enhancement, would need around 1.5 kilograms. Li Lu herself requires roughly 2.5 kilograms daily. And a tier 4 enhanced human, they would consume around 8 kilograms of food every single day. At that point, you're not eating meals anymore. You're basically operating an industrial food processing machine. Li Lu then points out the truly terrifying part. Grey Rat District currently has over 200 residents. If every one of them became a tier 4 enhanced human, the surrounding wildlife would be wiped out in no time. Every animal nearby would eventually be hunted and eaten. And once the food supply collapsed, even the enhanced humans themselves would begin starving to death. Suddenly, Chen Yang understands exactly what she's worried about. Powerful army sounds great. A powerful army that eats an entire ecosystem by accident? Not so great. Still, after calculating everything in his head, Chen Yang isn't particularly worried. Sure, more than 200 tier 4 evolvers would need over a ton of food every day. But unlike everyone else, he has access to an entire modern world. Compared to some of the ridiculous problems he's already solved, food is actually one of the easier ones. So he tells Li Lu not to worry about that issue. As the boss, food supply is his responsibility. Her responsibility is building the base and ensuring it can withstand any outside threats. Li Lu immediately agrees. Then Chen Yang makes a promise. No matter what tier an enhanced human reaches, everyone in the base will have enough food to eat. Hearing that, Li Lu is genuinely moved. The girl is practically practically overflowing with admiration at this point. Before she can get any more emotional, Chunyang quickly tells her not to get too excited and asks her to take him to Uncle Wei. She agrees, and the two head out under the scorching heat. A short while later, they find Uncle Wei. Seeing them arrive, he greets both Chunyang and Li Lu. Chunyang immediately asks about the research progress. Uncle Wei honestly admits that the computer technology Chunyang brought over is fairly outdated by his standards. Even so, there are still plenty of details he needs to learn before fully mastering it. Hearing that, Chunyang comments that the progress seems a little slow, but Uncle Wei quickly reassures him. He explains that if the task is simply porting existing computer programs, he could already handle that right now. The only problem is that he hasn't had a functioning computer available for proper practice. And honestly, it's kind of hard to become a computer expert when your computer doesn't even turn on. That's when Chunyang smiles, because he came prepared. He tells Uncle Wei that he's already brought exactly what he needs. Then a large box is placed on the ground. Chunyang points at it and tells Uncle Wei to use this one. And judging by the look on Uncle Wei's face, whatever is inside that box is about to speed up their plans by a lot. The moment the computer is set up, Uncle Wei gets excited. He immediately plugs in the power and starts experimenting with it. As he works, his eyes light up. Very quickly, he begins understanding how the system functions and how everything is implemented. After a while, he confidently tells Chunyang that there won't be any problems. As long as the hardware can support it, he can build whatever Chunyang wants. Hearing that, Chunyang finally reveals his real objective. He tells Uncle Wei that he needs an online game. Not just any game, either. It has to run on mobile phones from 200 years ago. Then he hands over a phone that already has a game installed for reference. Chunyang tells him to use it as a template, but there's one important requirement. The game he develops has to be even better and more addictive than the one on the phone. Uncle Wei agrees and starts studying it immediately. A few moments later, sounds begin echoing from the device. First blood, double kill, triple kill, quadra kill, pentakill, and before long, Uncle Wei's expression becomes increasingly strange. The more he plays, the more confused he gets. Finally, he looks up and asks a question that absolutely destroys every gamer within a 10-kilometer radius. He wonders if this thing is even worthy of being called a game. According to him, even some of the worst entertainment products from before the Great Cataclysm were countless times better than this. Talk about emotional damage. Imagine spending years arguing online about which MOBA is superior, only for a guy from the future to casually label the whole genre primitive. Uncle Wei then suggests something even crazier. If Chunyang allows him to use game concepts from before the Great Cataclysm as references, development could be completed much faster. Chunyang immediately agrees. He points out that this isn't copying. It's referencing. Completely different thing. Definitely. Totally. 100%. Then he tells Uncle Wei to just focus on finishing the project. As an added incentive, he promises an extra reward once the game is completed. Naturally, that makes Uncle Wei even more motivated. Chunyang then asks the question he cares about most. How long will development take? After making a rough estimate, Uncle Wei gives his answer. 7 days. At most 7 days. And he'll have the entire thing finished. Just like that, Chunyang's plan to bring future-level gaming knowledge into the modern world officially begins. And considering this guy is using technology that's 2 centuries ahead, something tells me the mobile gaming industry is about to get hit by a truck and won't even see it coming. Chunyang is completely caught off guard. 7 days? For a moment, he honestly doesn't know how to react. Back in his world, major AAA games often take years to develop. Even those simple mobile games that seem like they were made over a weekend usually require months of work. Yet this guy is casually talking about building an online game in a single week. At that moment, Chunyang once again feels the massive technological gap between the two worlds. Meanwhile, Uncle Wei notices Chunyang staying silent, and unfortunately, he completely misunderstands the reason. Instead of thinking Chunyang is shocked by how fast that is, Uncle Wei starts worrying that the boss thinks he's too slow. The poor guy immediately gets nervous. After hesitating for a moment, he decides to take a risk. He says that the project could actually be completed even faster. There are several other people in the settlement who understand intelligent brain-computer technology, and if he recruits them to help, development speed would increase significantly. Then he gives a new estimate, less than 5 days. This time, even Chunyang almost loses it. 5 days. Forget mobile game developers. There are people who spend 5 days just deciding what icon to use for the app. At this point, Chunyang can only laugh internally. He feels like finding Uncle Wei was basically hitting the jackpot. An SSS tier workaholic who can build games in under a week? What kind of blessing is this? Without hesitation, he pats Uncle Wei on the shoulder, gives him a thumbs up, and tells him to go recruit everyone he needs. However, Uncle Wei still looks hesitant. He points out that bringing in more people will increase Chun Yang's burden. After all, more workers means more supplies, more food, and more resources. But Chun Yang simply waves it off. He reveals that he originally planned to recruit everyone in Gray Rat District D anyway. The moment those words come out, Uncle Wei freezes. For a second, he thinks he misheard. Everyone? Li Lu immediately steps in and confirms that it's true. She explains that Chun Yang wants to establish a base of their own. As long as someone is loyal and trustworthy, they can be recruited. The moment Uncle Wei hears this, his emotions completely overflow. His eyes turn red. His voice starts trembling. Then, before anyone can stop him, he drops to his knees. He declares that Chun Yang is their savior. Chun Yang is immediately caught off guard. He quickly tells him not to do that. From his perspective, this is just employment. A boss hiring workers, nothing more. But Uncle Wei shakes his head. He says Chun Yang doesn't understand. The tax collection period is approaching, and if not for Chun Yang's arrival, everyone in Gray Rat District would have been in serious danger. Hearing that, Chun Yang becomes curious. Tax collection? This is the first time he's heard anyone mention it. He asks why nobody told him sooner. Li Lu lets out a sigh. She explains that it's a long story and says she'll explain everything after she finishes communicating with the settlement residents. Chun Yang agrees. For now, there are more urgent matters. He leaves the phone behind for testing and reminds Uncle Wei that he expects to see the finished game in 5 days. Uncle Wei immediately guarantees that the mission will be completed. No hesitation, no doubt, just pure confidence. With everything settled, Chun Yang announces that he'll be leaving. Uncle Wei respectfully tells him to take care. As Chun Yang disappears into the distance, Li Lu and Uncle Wei watch him leave. After a long silence, Uncle Wei finally asks the question that's been bothering him for a while. What exactly is the background of their boss? The more he thinks about it, the stranger everything becomes. All of the items Chun Yang brings come from hundreds of years ago, yet every single one looks brand new. Not old, not damaged, not even slightly worn. Honestly, they look fresher than products straight from a factory. Even unopened antiques shouldn't be preserved this perfectly. Li Lu quietly admits that she doesn't know either, but she also says something important. Since the boss doesn't want to reveal his secrets, she has no intention of prying into them, and for now, that's enough. He asks the one question that's been bothering him the most. How can they be certain Chun Yang doesn't have any malicious intentions toward them? Li Lu immediately repeats the phrase as if the idea itself sounds strange. Malicious intent? Uncle Wei points around the room and points out their reality. Their settlement is so poor that it's practically cleaner than their own faces. What exactly do they have that's worth Chun Yang scheming for? Hearing that, Li Lu actually pauses to think seriously. Then she suddenly realizes something. The food Chun Yang has casually brought over during the past few days is already enough to recruit an entire army of evolvers. Just that food alone is more valuable than most of the assets in Gray Rat District. When Uncle Wei hears that, he can only admit she has a point, but Li Lu still shakes her head. She explains that Chun Yang feels different from ordinary wastelanders. He has a kind of peaceful aura that simply doesn't exist in the wasteland. The people here are constantly struggling to survive. Everyone carries caution, hostility, or desperation in their eyes. Chun Yang doesn't. In fact, she's less worried about him harming others and more worried about someone else trying to harm him. Honestly, from her perspective, their boss is basically walking around with a giant "Please rob me" sign attached to his back. Uncle Wei suddenly understands something. He asks if that's why she deliberately avoided telling Chun Yang about the tax collection issue. Li Lu nods. She admits that's exactly why. To her, Chun Yang is the only opportunity Gray Rat District has to completely change its fate. Because of that, she intends to eliminate every possible risk factor before involving him. Uncle Wei finally understands her reasoning. With renewed determination, he declares that he'll work even harder and complete the task Chun Yang assigned as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, back in the modern world, Chun Yang returns to the familiar alleyway. After successfully teleporting back, he immediately remembers another problem. His phone situation, so he decides it's probably time to buy a new one. But before he can leave, something strange suddenly happens. A powerful sensation rises from deep within his body. Chun Yang instantly stops walking. The feeling is impossible to ignore. For a moment, he carefully examines himself. Then realization hits. This feeling is exactly what Li Lu described before. The enhancement serum has been fully absorbed, which means only one thing. His body is now ready for the next upgrade. A smile immediately appears on his face. Looks like he can finally inject the Tier 2 enhancement serum. And unlike unlike normal people who would probably spend some time preparing for a mysterious superhuman mutation, Chen doesn't hesitate at all. The guy treats world-changing serums the same way most people treat vitamin supplements. The moment he confirms his body's condition, he immediately decides to inject the Tier 2 serum, and considering how much stronger the first serum made him, there's no telling what kind of changes are about to happen next. Just as Chen is preparing for his next upgrade, he suddenly remembers another urgent problem. His phone is dead, so he heads straight to a phone store to buy a replacement. The saleswoman immediately starts introducing the latest flagship model, proudly explaining all its features. But before she can even finish the first sentence, Chen cuts her off. No introduction needed. He'll take it. The saleswoman is stunned. Honestly, every salesperson dreams of meeting customers like this. No questions, no bargaining, no spending 40 minutes comparing specifications on the internet. Just buy and leave. A few moments later, after activating the new phone, Chen finally checks it and instantly regrets everything. 8 missed calls, all from LV Churin. The moment he sees them, he nearly smacks himself. He suddenly realizes he completely forgot about her. Meanwhile, over at LV Churin's house, she's already staring at her phone while getting ready. The second the call connects, she immediately asks where he disappeared to and why he ignored so many calls. Chen quickly explains that his phone broke and that he only just bought a new one. Thankfully, the excuse is actually true this time. After hearing the explanation, Churin finally calms down. She tells him to wait for her because she's coming to pick him up personally. Then she turns to her father and asks for the car keys. She says she needs to go pick up a classmate. Her father immediately becomes suspicious. Very suspicious. Seeing his daughter put on makeup and personally drive out to meet a boy, his father can't help reminding her to be careful. You can practically see the protective father instincts activating. Churin immediately rolls her eyes and explains that Chen is coming to inspect the factory. Her father hears that and becomes even more confused. A male classmate inspecting the factory? In his mind, he's already imagining his precious daughter slowly being stolen away. The poor man is internally mourning before anything has even happened. Still, he tells her to hurry up and bring Chen directly to the factory. Meanwhile, Chen agrees and heads over. About half an hour later, a car speeds toward LV's food factory. Inside the passenger seat, Chen is experiencing something between transportation and a life-threatening event. By the time they arrive, he looks visibly shaken. Churin notices immediately and asks whether her driving is really that scary. Chen instantly denies it. Of course, his expression says the exact opposite. The guy looked like he just survived a boss battle. After arriving at the factory, Chen finally meets Churin's father in person. The older man warmly welcomes him and thanks him for making the trip despite the factory being located in such a remote area. Chen immediately acts respectfully. He points out that he and Churin have been classmates since middle school and says that uncle can simply treat him as a junior. But Churin's father refuses. Business is business. Since they're discussing cooperation, he insists on treating Chen as a business partner. Then he asks whether Churin already explained the factory's situation during the drive over. Chen confirms that she told him a little. However, instead of wasting time, he immediately asks the most important question. How many orders does the factory need each month to operate in a healthy and sustainable manner? Hearing that, Churin's father starts calculating. Between employee salaries, factory rent, utilities, and raw material costs, maintaining basic operations requires nearly 300,000 yuan every month. Chen listens carefully. Then he calmly asks another question. If he provides demand worth 400,000 yuan every month, would the factory not only survive but also turn a profit? The moment those words come out, the atmosphere changes. Churin's father is visibly shocked. Meanwhile, Churin looks delighted because unlike her father, she already knows Chen isn't asking hypothetical questions. He's serious. After recovering from the surprise, her father quickly confirms that Chen is absolutely correct. With that level of monthly demand, the factory would not only stay open but finally become profitable again. And just like that, Chen is about to become far more important to this struggling factory than anyone expected. Just when the discussion seems to be wrapping up, Churin's father suddenly pulls his daughter aside. He tells Chen to wait a moment because he needs to talk to Churin privately. Chen casually agrees. The second they're out of earshot, the father lowers his voice and shares what's really on his mind. According to him, Chen doesn't look like he's here to do business at all. He looks like he's here to do poverty alleviation. Honestly, the man isn't completely wrong. Who casually shows up and offers enough monthly orders to save a struggling factory? That's not normal business behavior. That's main character behavior. Then the father asks a question that instantly makes Churin's face heat up. He wonders whether his daughter secretly used her charm to help her old man secure secure this deal. The moment those words leave his mouth, Charon immediately pushes him away and tells him to stop talking nonsense. Absolutely not. Seeing her reaction, the father quickly retreats. Message received. No further questions. A short while later, he returns to Chunyang and gets back to business. He asks whether the order has any additional requirements. Chunyang says there is only one. The packaging must remain as simple as possible. No trademarks, no production dates, no ingredient lists, nothing. The father is immediately surprised. Technically, products like that wouldn't comply with regulations. But Chunyang quickly reassures him. The food isn't intended for sale on the market. He has his own uses for it. As long as the factory can continuously produce enough food each month, the specific type of food doesn't matter. Then he casually drops another huge piece of information. The 400,000 yuan monthly demand isn't even the final target. That's only the minimum. In the future, the order volume will increase, not decrease. The moment he hears that, Charon's father is stunned. At this point, he's starting to wonder whether Chunyang secretly owns some giant corporation. He asks one final time if he's serious. Chunyang calmly confirms that he is. In fact, he's willing to sign the contract immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Before long, the three of them are sitting inside the office. Charon's father prepares the contract and places it on the desk. He tells Chunyang to review it carefully and mention anything that needs to be modified. But Chunyang barely even looks at it. He says he trusts how uncle handles business. Then he directly signs the agreement. Just like that. No endless negotiations. No 20-page arguments. No pretending to leave the room for leverage. The man signs faster than most people accept app terms and conditions. And then he does something that shocks Charon's father even more. He transfers the payment immediately. When the notification arrives, the father checks the amount and freezes. Because this isn't a deposit. It's the full payment. The entire amount upfront. The father looks up in disbelief and asks why he paid everything in advance. Chunyang simply smiles. Then he stands up and shakes the older man's hand once more. He explains that he trusts Charon. And he trusts uncle even more. That single sentence immediately earns a great deal of goodwill. After all, trust is one thing. Trust backed by actual money is another level entirely. The father nods respectfully. At this point, he's no longer treating Chunyang like an ordinary classmate of his daughter. He's treating him like a serious business partner. With genuine appreciation, he tells Chunyang that it has been a pleasure doing business with him. Back in Grey Rat District D, almost every survivor in the settlement has gathered together. People are standing shoulder to shoulder, whispering among themselves, trying to figure out what exactly is going on. Li Lu looks around at the crowd and tells Chunyang that everyone from Grey Rat District D is here. As Chunyang walks toward the stage, the crowd keeps discussing him. Some people are skeptical. One guy looks at Chunyang's relatively ordinary appearance and wonders whether this young man is really reliable. A woman nearby shrugs and says it doesn't really matter who shows up. They're already dirt poor with nothing left to lose anyway. Honestly, when your situation is bad enough, taking a gamble starts looking like a reasonable life strategy. Chunyang clears his throat and gets everyone's attention. Then he introduces himself. He explains that his name is Chunyang and that he plans to establish his own base in Grey Rat District D. From now on, he'll be their boss. The moment he finishes speaking, silence. Complete silence. Not a single cheer. Not even a reaction. Chunyang is immediately confused. In his mind, he's wondering why nobody seems excited. Then he realizes something important. These people don't care about titles. They care about survival. So he immediately gets to the point. He announces that anyone who joins him will receive food support. Not only that, but he guarantees that nobody under him will ever go hungry again. The effect is instant. It works better than any motivational speech ever could. People's eyes immediately light up. A woman excitedly asks whether he's serious. Others start looking at each other in disbelief. Several survivors ask if becoming his subordinate really means they won't have to worry about food anymore. Chunyang confidently confirms it. Absolutely true. The crowd explodes. A moment ago, everyone looked exhausted and hopeless. Now they suddenly look like they just won the lottery. One woman practically jumps with excitement and starts cheering for Boss Chun. At that point, the entire atmosphere changes. And honestly, that's the power of food in a wasteland. Forget fancy speeches. Promise people they can eat tomorrow, and you've already won half the battle. Seeing everyone's excitement, Chunyang finally feels satisfied. Now that's the reaction he was expecting. But he isn't finished. He tells everyone that all they need to do is follow his plans and work together to build Grey Rat District D into a proper base. Then he starts painting a picture of the future. The rusty barbed wire defenses surrounding the settlement will eventually become solid concrete walls. The broken down shacks everyone currently lives in will will be replaced with clean, comfortable homes. Most importantly, he promises that they will live like actual human beings instead of scavenging like gray rats. The crowd listens in stunned silence. For many of them, the future he's describing sounds almost impossible. Some people can't help asking whether those goals can really be achieved. Seeing their hesitation, Chun-Yang immediately takes another step. He tells everyone that he understands their concerns. That's why anyone willing to join can receive 1 week's worth of food in advance. The moment those words come out, the crowd completely loses control. A week of food, a front, no waiting, no conditions. No wonder people are losing their minds. Li Lu is the first to start cheering. She loudly celebrates Boss Chen, and before long the entire crowd joins in. Soon, chants begin spreading through the settlement. Long live Boss Chen! Long live Boss Chen! The sound echoes throughout Gray Rat District. After letting the excitement settle down, Chun-Yang tells everyone he's finished speaking. Anyone willing to join can now come register. The second he says that, chaos erupts. People immediately start rushing forward. One young guy desperately tries squeezing through the crowd, shouting that he wants to sign up first. Meanwhile, a woman instantly tells him to stop pushing and reminds him that ladies should go first. Even in the apocalypse, some arguments never change. As registration begins, Li Lu starts introducing the applicants one by one. The first person she points out is Li Hua, 17 years old, and unlike most survivors, he actually knows a bit about intelligent brain technology, which immediately catches Chun-Yang's attention. Because if he's recruiting talent for his future base, then this kid might be far more valuable than he looks at first glance. Chun-Yang immediately assigns him a position under Uncle Wei as an assistant. Then Chun-Yang offers him a salary of 25 jin of food and 6 jin of raw meat every month and asks whether that's acceptable. Li Hua doesn't even need time to think. He immediately agrees. Honestly, the kid looks afraid Chun-Yang might change his mind if he hesitates for too long. Chun-Yang tells him to hold on to his contract and moves on to the next applicant. Soon, a large and muscular young man steps forward. The guy admits he doesn't have any technical skills, but says he's got plenty of strength. Li Lu introduces him as Jiang Qi, 24 years old and already a Tier 1 enhanced human. The moment Chun-Yang sees the man's physique, he can't help being impressed. The guy is built like a truck. After looking him up and down, Chun-Yang jokes that he has an excellent foundation and is basically a natural-born holy body for construction work. Poor Jiang Qi probably expected a combat position and somehow got recruited into civil engineering. Chun-Yang then offers him 40 jin of food and 20 jin of raw meat every month. Jiang Qi's eyes practically light up. He immediately says that's more than enough. And just like that, another person joins the team. One after another, survivors continue stepping forward. Some have useful skills, some have strength, some simply have the willingness to work. But no matter who comes forward, Chun-Yang gives each person a position and a source of stability. For perhaps the first time in a very long time, the people of Gray Rat District can actually see a future ahead of them. By the time recruitment finally ends, everyone leaves with smiles on their faces. Even Chun-Yang is feeling satisfied. Li Lu finishes counting the records and reports that every single survivor in Gray Rat District D has signed up. Every one of them. Chun-Yang lets out a relieved breath. Finally, the hiring process is done. But now that business is finished, it's time to discuss something much more serious. Chun-Yang turns toward Li Lu and reminds her that she still hasn't explained the tax collection situation. This time, Li Lu nods. No more avoiding the topic. She begins explaining. Every 3 months, Gray Rat Town collects taxes from all subordinate settlements. And the tax isn't money, it's food. The moment Chun-Yang hears that, he frowns. The survivors here can barely feed themselves as it is. How are they supposed to hand over food on top of that? He asks whether the rulers of Gray Rat Town aren't worried people will simply run away. Li Lu gives a bitter smile. Run where? The entire wasteland works like this. Inside settlements, survival is difficult. Outside settlements, survival is nearly impossible. Most people don't have a choice. They're trapped. Stay and suffer, or leave and die. That's the reality. Chun-Yang then points out something else. There are quite a few enhanced humans in the settlement already. Why not resist? Why not fight back? Li Lu immediately shakes her head. According to her, the rulers of Gray Rat Town maintain power by supporting an entire squad of high-level enhancers. Compared to them, Gray Rat District D doesn't stand a chance. The difference in strength is simply too large. Hearing that, Chunyang finally starts putting the pieces together. Suddenly, everything makes sense. The rulers aren't collecting food because they're hungry. They're collecting food because food equals power. The less food ordinary settlements possess, the harder it becomes for them to trade for enhancement serums. And the fewer enhancement serums they obtain, the weaker they remain. It's a perfect control system. Keep everyone hungry. Keep everyone weak. Keep everyone obedient. Realizing this, Chunyang understands that conflict is inevitable. If Grey Rat District keeps growing stronger, Grey Rat Town will eventually notice. And once they do, a confrontation is only a matter of time. That means there isn't much time left. Chunyang immediately reaches a conclusion. They need enhancement serums. A lot of enhancement serums. And they need them fast. Li Lu understands what he's implying and immediately agrees. Chunyang then states their next objective. Before the next tax collection arrives, they must build enough strength to surpass the rulers of Grey Rat Town. Because when that day comes, they won't just be paying taxes. They'll be deciding who really controls Grey Rat District. And that's a completely different battle. As soon as the plane lands at Daijing Airport, Chunyang heads out while wondering how things are going on Dandan's side at the company. Before he can look around much, Dandan is already waving at him and calling him over. When they meet up, Chunyang asks why she came to pick him up personally. Dandan immediately fires back, saying that he's the big boss now while she's just a miserable wage slave. Then she points out that if she hadn't come to get him, he probably wouldn't even know where the company is. Chunyang can only admit that she has a point. A little while later, they arrive at the company building. After taking a look at it, Chunyang says the place looks pretty impressive. Dandan immediately takes credit, telling him that she personally picked it out herself. You can practically hear the pride in her voice. As they head inside, Dandan starts giving him a tour. She explains that the regular employee offices are located on both sides, while Chunyang's office is at the very end. Then she opens the door and asks what he thinks. Chunyang looks around carefully before taking a seat. After checking everything out, he says he's very satisfied. Not bad. For a company that's only just getting started, things are looking pretty decent. Once he's settled in, Chunyang asks about the recruitment progress. Dandan reports that the finance and legal departments have already been onboarded, while the remaining departments are still going through the hiring process. After updating him, she asks whether they should hold a meeting with the current employees. But Chunyang immediately rejects the idea. He says there isn't much point because he wouldn't even know what to say at a meeting right now. Dandan is completely speechless. She points out that she's never seen a startup boss become a hands-off boss this quickly. The company has barely started, and this guy is already delegating everything. Chunyang, however, seems completely unconcerned. He explains that his main responsibility will be the company's products and research and development. Everything else, that's going straight to Dandan. Naturally, Dandan immediately realizes what's happening. She says she knew he was planning to exploit her. Honestly, fair reaction. Chunyang immediately tries to dress it up nicely. He tells her this is actually training. They're simply developing their abilities in advance. Then he pats her on the head and tells her that when the company grows larger in the future, she'll be able to serve as his right-hand woman. Dandan clearly enjoys the compliment, but she still lets out a helpless sigh. She says she genuinely has no idea where Chunyang gets all this confidence from. Then she warns him not to run the company into the ground. Meanwhile, Chunyang remains completely confident. After all, he knows something nobody else does. With the technological support he's getting from the wasteland, he believes there is absolutely no chance things will go wrong. After discussing the company's recruitment progress, Chunyang suddenly asks about the game distribution platforms. Dandan reports that most of them have already been settled and are following the standard revenue-sharing agreements. Then she hands over the contract documents. She explains that the app stores operated by mobile phone brands still require product inspections, so those will take a little more time. However, there is one particular problem. Chunyang immediately asks what the issue is. Dandan explains that the problem comes from the Fruit Phone App Store. Naturally, Chunyang wants to know what happened. Dandan tells him that their contact over there heavily hinted that they should proactively offer some kickbacks. Otherwise, their application would simply have to wait in line for inspection. Hearing that, Chunyang is immediately unhappy. He makes it clear that he has no intention of paying any kickbacks. Not even a little. Dandan understands his position, but she still points out the reality of the situation. The Fruit Phone has a massive market share. If their game can't launch on its app store, they'll lose access to a huge number number of potential users. But Chun-Yang remains completely unconcerned. He tells her not to worry. Their product will speak for itself. At the same time, he believes that sooner or later, the other side will be the one asking them to join. Dandan can only shrug. At the end of the day, he's the boss. If that's his decision, then that's his decision. So she says she'll go back to work and leaves the office. After she leaves, Chun-Yang relaxes in his chair for a moment. As he leans back, another idea suddenly crosses his mind. He wonders whether developing his own mobile phone brand in the future would be possible. After all, if he controlled a major mobile platform, he could also earn a share of the revenue from games released by other companies. It's an interesting thought, but after considering it for a moment, he decides it's still far too early to be thinking about something like that. One step at a time. For now, there are more important things to handle. So Chun-Yang gets up and decides to head home first. However, just as he's leaving, something unexpected happens. A familiar face suddenly appears right in front of him. The two spot each other at almost the exact same moment. Chun-Yang immediately recognizes her as Fang Jia, and at the same time, Fang Jia recognizes him as well. Just as Chun-Yang is about to leave, Fang Jia suddenly calls out to him. She says it's quite a coincidence running into him there, and immediately asks where his girlfriend is. Chun-Yang is caught off guard for a moment. Then he remembers that Jiang Jinglong had previously told everyone that Xu Ye was his girlfriend. No wonder Fang Jia asked that. Wanting to change the subject, Chun-Yang asks what she's doing there. Fang Jia explains that she's here for a job interview because she wants to change jobs. Just talking about it seems to put her in a good mood. Meanwhile, Chun-Yang can't help wondering whether she's interviewing at his company. That would be one heck of a coincidence. Still, he doesn't ask any further questions. Instead, he simply wishes her success and prepares to leave. But before he can go, Fang Jia suddenly stops him. Chun-Yang asks if there's something else. Looking slightly shy, Fang Jia brings up next week's class gathering. She explains that Jiang Jinglong wants to invite all the classmates who stayed in Daxing out for a meal. Then she asks whether Chun-Yang plans to attend. Chun-Yang immediately asks if she wants him to go. Fang Jia says that there aren't many classmates left in Daxing anymore, and keeping in touch could help everyone look out for each other in the future. After hearing that, Chun-Yang agrees. He says he'll be there on time. With that settled, the two part ways. Meanwhile, back at Grey Rat District D, construction is in full swing. The moment Chun-Yang arrives, people immediately start greeting him everywhere he goes. Everyone is calling out to Boss Chin. And honestly, compared to when he first arrived, the atmosphere is completely different now. Chun-Yang starts inspecting the construction work and asks about the progress of the defensive fortifications. One of the workers quickly reports that everything is going smoothly. Now that everyone has enough food to eat, morale is extremely high. People are working harder than ever. According to the current progress, the entire perimeter should be sealed off within a few more days. Once that's done, ordinary mutant creatures won't be able to enter the base anymore. Hearing that, Chun-Yang immediately asks a more important question. What about human enhancers? Can these defenses stop them too? The worker hesitates before admitting that the effectiveness would be much lower. After all, mutant creatures can be trapped. Humans can think. And once brains enter the equation, ordinary traps become a lot less reliable. Hearing that, Chun-Yang realizes they still have a long way to go. The base's armaments need to be expanded even further. Just then, someone suddenly notices a familiar figure approaching. The person excitedly points out that Li Lu has returned. A moment later, Li Lu arrives and immediately reports back. Even though the journey has clearly exhausted her, the second she sees Chun-Yang, her mood instantly improves. She practically lights up. Then, without hesitation, she jumps straight into his arms. Chun-Yang catches her and welcomes her back, thanking her for her hard work. After that, Li Lu opens her bag and gets straight to business. She reveals that all of the enhancement serums Chun-Yang requested have been successfully obtained. Then she shows him the serums. With this batch, everyone in Grey Rat District will be able to reach Tier 4 enhancement. The moment Chun-Yang sees the amount she brought back, he immediately asks whether the Doctors Association had any objections. After all, this wasn't exactly a small transaction, but Li Lu simply shakes her head. Why would they object? According to her, the trade helped the Doctors Association complete more than a year's worth of trading demand in a single deal. Far from being unhappy, they were absolutely thrilled about it. Chun-Yang immediately tells Li Lu to arrange the injections for everyone right away. Li Lu hesitates for a moment. Even now, she's still worried about the food issue. She reminds him that once everyone receives the serum injections, the settlement's food consumption will at least double compared to its current level. fearful. She wants to know if that's really okay. But Chun-Yang remains completely calm. He pats her and tells her not to worry. Not only is there enough food, but there will be more and more varieties and flavors in the future. The moment Li Lu hears the words, more varieties and flavors, her attention instantly shifts. Her eyes practically light up. She immediately says she wants to try them as soon as possible. Honestly, the girl went from worrying about logistics to thinking about food in record time. Chun-Yang can't help smiling. He reassures her that every time a new variety arrives, she'll be the first one allowed to taste it. Hearing that, Li Lu becomes even happier. She excitedly tells him that he's the best boss to her. Then she suddenly remembers something important. Her expression becomes more serious as she reports another piece of news. While handling the recent trades, she discovered that information about their massive food for supplies exchanges has already started spreading. Even though they deliberately changed people and locations during the transactions, the secret still leaked out. Chun-Yang isn't particularly surprised. He says this kind of thing was inevitable from the beginning. The more resources they trade, the harder it becomes to stay hidden, which is exactly why they need strength, and they need it fast. Chun-Yang explains that after everyone finishes receiving their enhancement serums, their first priority should be increasing the settlement's ability to fight against other enhancers. Then he reminds Li Lu of another task. Once the serum injections are complete, everyone's weekly salary needs to be adjusted accordingly. Li Lu immediately agrees. She says she'll recalculate everything and later report the total figures back to him. But Chun-Yang still isn't finished planning. He gives one more important order. He tells Li Lu to select a few smart and capable people from the settlement and secretly send them into Gray Rat Town. Their mission will be to act as undercover spies. Li Lu immediately understands the purpose. This way, they'll be able to monitor Gray Rat Town's movements as soon as anything happens. But Chun-Yang points out that gathering information isn't the only goal. They also need to discover exactly what hidden cards the rulers of Gray Rat Town are holding. Only by understanding both sides can they properly prepare for the conflict that's clearly approaching. Li Lu nods and says she'll make the arrangements immediately. Then, just before leaving, she suddenly remembers one last thing. According to her, Uncle Wei recently sent word that his research and development project has already produced results. The moment Chun-Yang hears that, his attention snaps back. Li Lu asks whether he wants to go confirm it in person, and Chun-Yang doesn't need a second invitation. The game is finally finished. After waiting all this time, he's naturally excited to see the results. So without wasting another moment, he decides to head over immediately. The second he gets there, he excitedly asks if the game is really complete. Uncle Wei turns around and tells him he arrived at the perfect time because the debugging was just finished. Then something unexpected happens. A small creature suddenly appears and starts chirping. Chun-Yang immediately stops and asks what exactly that thing is. Uncle Wei explains that this is the game content Chun-Yang requested. To achieve the virtual reality effect, they used holographic projection technology to display the game's creatures. As he explains, he casually interacts with the little creature. Meanwhile, Chun-Yang is completely stunned. He asks whether this kind of effect can really be achieved on a mobile phone as well. Uncle Wei confidently says yes. In fact, to make everything compatible with the phone's hardware, they even developed a special algorithm specifically for it. According to him, the algorithm may be somewhat outdated by their standards, but it's extremely stable. Then Chun-Yang presses a button. The next moment, another creature pops out from the phone and jumps directly onto him. At that point, he's genuinely amazed. The guy asked for a mobile game. A few days later, Uncle Wei hands him what basically looks like science fiction. Honestly, the technological gap between these worlds is doing some heavy lifting. Meanwhile, Uncle Wei notices that Chun-Yang has gone quiet. Seeing that reaction, he starts getting nervous. He worries that the boss might not be satisfied with the final product. But Chun-Yang's silence has nothing to do with disappointment. He's still processing what he's seeing. Then he immediately asks about something important. What's the manifestation range of these spirit beasts? Uncle Wei explains that because the holographic projection relies on the phone's camera, the maximum range is roughly 3 meters around the device. After hearing that, Chun-Yang asks another key question. Can all of the game's systems and programs be implemented on a normal computer using a programming language? Uncle Wei confidently says yes. However, he also mentions that he specifically designed an entirely new programming language for the project. Then he asks whether that's acceptable. The moment Chun-Yang hears that, he becomes even more excited. Not only is there no problem, but he says the result completely exceeded his highest expectations. Far exceeded them. Only then does Uncle Wei finally relax. The poor guy looks like a mountain has been lifted off his shoulders. After all, he clearly poured an insane amount of effort into this project. Chun-Yang notices immediately and asks whether he he's okay. Uncle Wei insists that he's fine. He simply hasn't slept in a very long time and is feeling a bit sleepy. A bit sleepy. Yeah, the man looks like he personally fought the final boss of game development. Chunyang quickly tells him to sit down and get some rest. But Uncle Wei still insists on staying available in case there are any questions about the game. Then Chunyang remembers one final thing he needs to know. The file size. He asks how large the game actually is. Uncle Wei immediately reassures him. To solve that problem, he utilized cloud technology so that the terminal device only needs to process a very small amount of data. As a result, the game's installation size is only a little over 400 megabytes. The moment Chunyang hears that number, he realizes the finished product is even more ridiculous than he initially thought. A game with holographic projection, spirit beasts, and virtual reality features, and it only takes a little over 400 megabytes. After hearing the final file size, Chunyang is genuinely shocked. A little over 400 megabytes? The guy can barely believe it. Nowadays, mobile games casually take up tens of gigabytes of storage. Even some simple card games end up being ridiculously large. Yet Uncle Wei somehow created a game with holographic projection and spirit beasts that only takes a little over 400 megabytes. At this point, Chunyang is once again reminded just how insane wasteland technology really is. However, Uncle Wei quickly points out one important limitation. Because the game relies on cloud technology, it can no longer run offline. Players must connect to the network in order to retrieve data from the server. Hearing that, Chunyang isn't worried at all. In fact, he almost seems pleased. After all, if players aren't connected to the internet, how are they supposed to recharge money into the game? The boss is already thinking several steps ahead. Then Chunyang asks one final question. How was the game's monetization system designed? In response, Uncle Wei pulls up a panel and shows him the details. According to him, many of the systems were referenced from existing games. Before the Great Cataclysm, game companies had already developed mature methods for encouraging player spending. As Chunyang looks through the interface, he sees all the familiar features. VIP systems, gacha mechanics, illustrated handbooks, character progression systems, the classics. At that moment, Chunyang comes to a realization. Technology may have advanced by hundreds of years, but when it comes to convincing players to spend money, apparently nothing has changed. Some traditions are simply eternal. After showing everything, Uncle Wei asks whether there are any other questions. Chunyang says there aren't. Then he asks the thing he cares about most. When can he get the source code files? Uncle Wei explains that one final round of balance adjustments is still needed. If everything goes smoothly, the finished product can be delivered tomorrow morning. Hearing that, Chunyang nods. Then he suddenly changes the topic. Pointing at the phone in his hand, he asks Uncle Wei what he thinks of it. Uncle Wei takes a quick look. Then he delivers a brutally honest evaluation. According to him, it's a well-maintained piece of garbage. An old antique. The answer hits Chunyang immediately. The guy just bought this phone not long ago, and now someone from 200 years in the future is calling it an antique. Honestly, that's got to sting a little. For a moment, Chunyang doesn't even know how to react. Still, he quickly moves on and asks a more important question. Is it possible to design a brand new mobile phone using current hardware as a foundation? Unfortunately, this time Uncle Wei shakes his head. He explains that mobile phone design isn't his specialty. What he excels at is software development. Industrial design is an entirely different field, and when it comes to that area, he admits he knows basically nothing. Chunyang immediately asks another question. Does he know where people with expertise in hardware and industrial design can be found? Uncle Wei thinks about it for a moment before giving an answer. Grey Rat Town has a much larger population than District D. If Chunyang is looking for specialists, there should be people there who understand those fields. Hearing that, Chunyang immediately gets the idea. At least now he has a direction to investigate. For the time being, though, the mobile phone project can wait. The game comes first, so he tells Uncle Wei to focus on optimizing the game and completing the final adjustments. Then he throws out another incentive. If the finished product turns out to be good enough, everyone involved will receive an extra bonus. The moment Uncle Wei hears that, his motivation shoots up again. He immediately assures Chunyang that they won't disappoint him. As evening approaches, Chunyang is busy teleporting around again. While moving from place to place, he thinks that managing hundreds of people at the same time really isn't easy. Just then, his phone suddenly rings. Looking at the screen, he notices it's an unknown number. Naturally, he's confused about who could be calling him. After answering, the caller introduces herself as Chu Xian and says she wants to meet him tonight to discuss a business deal. The moment Chunyang hears that, he's immediately suspicious. He wonders whether scam syndicates have become this sophisticated nowadays. Chu Xian seems to understand his doubts and tells him she'll prove that she isn't a scammer, but Chun Yang clearly isn't interested in continuing the conversation. At this point, food is a much higher priority, so he hangs up and turns his attention back to dinner. Looking at the dishes in front of him, he can't help admiring his own cooking. The guy is genuinely impressed with himself. Then, just as he's about to eat, he hears someone come home. A woman walks in looking completely exhausted and lets out a long sigh. Seeing her arrive, Chun Yang immediately tells her she came back at the perfect time because dinner is ready. Then he asks whether she went to another audition. She confirms that she did. However, Chun Yang quickly notices that something is wrong. Based on her expression alone, it's obvious things didn't go well. After a moment of silence, she finally explains what happened. She had gone to audition for a new project from one of her favorite directors. According to her, it's a major production that's widely recognized within the industry and could even compete for this year's ratings champion. Hearing that, Chun Yang is surprised. He asks whether a complete newcomer like her was actually able to audition for such a huge production. But instead of being excited, she suddenly starts crying. Then she reveals the real problem. She wasn't auditioning for the female lead. She wasn't even auditioning for an important supporting role. It was a background character with only 4 lines of dialogue. And despite that, she still didn't get selected. Chun Yang immediately asks whether the director tried pulling any unspoken rule nonsense again, but she shakes her head. This time, the role simply went to someone with connections. After saying that, she becomes even more discouraged. She asks Chun Yang whether she's simply not suited to be an actress. Chun Yang is about to respond, but before he can say anything, her phone suddenly rings. She tells him to wait a moment while she answers it. After picking up the call, her expression changes almost immediately. At first, she listens quietly. Then she suddenly becomes excited and asks whether what she's hearing is actually true. Seeing that reaction, Chun Yang immediately asks what's going on. A moment later, she turns and stares directly at him. The look is so intense that Chun Yang immediately feels uncomfortable. So he asks why she's looking at him like that. Then she says something that completely catches him off guard. She tells him that she thinks she needs to get to know him all over again. Chun Yang is completely confused and asks what she means by needing to get to know him all over again. She immediately reveals what just happened. The director from her audition called her, and according to him, she passed. Hearing that, Chun Yang immediately congratulates her. But before he can relax, she steps even closer and drops an even bigger bombshell. The role she got isn't some minor background character anymore. It's the female lead, the #1 female role in the entire production. The same major production she was talking about earlier, the one expected to compete for this year's ratings champion. At this point, even Chun Yang is getting nervous. Things are starting to feel a little strange. Still, he quickly suggests that this is good news and says they should have a big feast to celebrate. But she immediately tells him to wait. Then she points a finger at him and explains what the director told her. According to the director, the reason she was able to get the role was because of Chun Yang. The moment Chun Yang hears that, he's stunned. Because of him, he immediately points out that he doesn't know any directors at all. Then he starts thinking about something. Could it be that the woman who called him earlier wanting to discuss business helped arrange this? Before he can think about it any further, his phone suddenly starts ringing again. Seeing the incoming call, Chun Yang excuses himself and says he'll answer it first. Then he picks up. On the other end of the line is Chu Xian, and the very first thing she asks is whether he's satisfied with her meeting gift. On the phone, Chu Xian immediately asks whether Mr. Chun now believes she isn't a scammer. After what just happened with the audition, Chun Yang can't exactly argue with that. Still, he gets straight to the point. He asks why someone of Chu Xian's status would have business to discuss with a person like him. But Chu Xian doesn't explain anything. Instead, she tells him that she'll send him an address later and asks him to come to the meeting alone. Then she hangs up. Just like that, Chun Yang keeps calling out hello a few more times, but the line is already dead. Meanwhile, the girl immediately asks whether he was actually the one who put in a good word with the director. Chun Yang quickly denies it. He tells her that he doesn't know anyone in the entertainment industry at all. Hearing that, she becomes even more concerned. She points out that whoever this woman is, she went to enormous lengths just to prove her influence and wealth. Not only did she interfere with the audition, but she even investigated people around Chen-yang. To her, that means the business Chu Xian wants to discuss is probably far bigger than it appears on the surface. Chen-yang admits that he has no idea what's going on either. Unfortunately, Chu Xian refuses to explain anything over the phone. Because of that, he says he can only go meet her and find out in person. The moment she hears that, she immediately objects. She tells him it's too dangerous. In fact, she's even willing to give up the lead role if it means he won't go. Hearing that, Chen-yang is genuinely surprised. After all, this is the lead role in a major production. Yet she's willing to walk away from it. Then he gently taps her on the head and calls her silly. She immediately asks what he's doing. Chen-yang then explains his reasoning. If Chu Xian is willing to go this far just to arrange a meeting, refusing won't actually solve anything. The other side will simply find another way to force contact. And if that happens, the situation could become even more dangerous. Because of that, he believes it's better to attend the meeting, figure out exactly what Chu Xian wants, and then make a decision afterward. After hearing his explanation, she finally understands. Even so, she can only ask him to be extremely careful. Chen-yang reassures her and says he already has his own arrangements. As night falls, Chen-yang arrives at the meeting location. The building's interior is decorated in a very retro style, giving the entire place a unique atmosphere. Before he can enter, one of the guards stops him and asks whether he is Chen-yang. After confirming his identity, the guards explain that they need to make sure he isn't carrying any weapons. Chen-yang doesn't resist at all. He simply tells them to go ahead. After completing the search, the guards confirm everything is fine. Then they tell him to follow them because Miss Chu is already waiting inside. As Chen-yang follows them deeper into the building, he carefully observes the people around him. The more he looks, the more surprised he becomes. The aura coming from these guards is actually stronger than Li Lu's. Just from that alone, he can tell that none of them are ordinary people. Seeing that, he can't help wondering whether his current Tier 2 enhancement would be enough to defeat them if a fight broke out. A moment later, one of the guards stops in front of a door. After knocking, he announces that Chen-yang has arrived and asks for permission to let him enter. The door finally opens. As Chen-yang walks inside, he immediately sees Chu Xian waiting for him. Not only that, but a full table of delicious food has already been prepared. Chu Xian politely invites him to take a seat. She explains that the matter was urgent, which is why her way of inviting him may have been somewhat offensive. Then she asks for his understanding. After that, she introduces the meal. According to her, although the restaurant isn't open to the public, its Guanfu cuisine is extremely authentic and worth trying. Then she gets straight to another matter. She openly admits that she spent the last few days conducting a background investigation on Chen-yang. As an apology, she says she'll punish herself with a drink first. Hearing that, Chen-yang isn't impressed at all. He points out that it's easy for her to say that now, but how could someone simply not mind being investigated? After putting down her glass, Chu Xian calmly explains her reasoning. She says she only wanted to confirm one thing, whether Chen-yang truly had no connections to people within her social circle. According to her, that information was extremely important, which is why she felt she had no choice but to investigate. Chen-yang responds that an ordinary person like him would never normally have any dealings with a major figure like her in the first place. Surprisingly, Chu Xian agrees. She says he's absolutely right. If it weren't for one specific event, their paths never would have crossed. Then she directly mentions Chen-yang's grandfather. More specifically, the fact that his grandfather's liver cancer was suddenly cured. The moment those words leave her mouth, Chen-yang is shocked, because this is exactly the topic he didn't want anyone investigating. At that moment, only one thought flashes through his mind. Was the secret exposed after all? After hearing Chu Xian bring up his grandfather's miraculous recovery, Chen-yang immediately says he has no idea what she's talking about. But Chu Xian isn't buying it. She straight up tells him to stop pretending. Then she gets right to the point. If Chen-yang is willing to tell her the method used to cure his grandfather, she's prepared to offer 3 rewards. The first reward is that she can arrange for someone to cover up the loopholes in his grandfather's medical records, ensuring that nobody else will discover what happened. The second reward catches Chen-yang completely off guard. Through a venture capital fund, she is willing to provide angel round financing for Chen-yang Technology Company Limited, 100 million, in exchange for only 5% of the company. The moment Chen-yang hears that number, even he is shocked shocked. 100 million is no small amount. Still, he remains calm and asks about the third reward. Chu Xian then reveals it. The third reward is the friendship of the Chu family. To make sure he understands exactly what that means, she tells him that her grandfather is Chu Liangpeng and suggests looking him up himself. After checking, Chunyang quickly realizes that Chu Liangpeng is an extremely influential figure. He immediately asks whether that really is her grandfather. Chu Xian calmly confirms it. Then she asks whether he finally understands the value of the Chu family's friendship. At this point, Chunyang starts weighing everything carefully. Money isn't actually the main issue. With the technology he has access to, he believes wealth can be earned sooner or later. However, his grandfather's medical records are a genuine hidden danger. And if he wants to continue doing business smoothly in the future, having powerful people backing him certainly wouldn't hurt. The problem is trust. This deal comes with no real binding guarantees. So how exactly is he supposed to trust Chu Xian? Perhaps noticing his hesitation, Chu Xian proposes a compromise. She says she'll provide the first 2 rewards in advance tomorrow. As for the friendship of the Chu family, that will officially take effect once her grandfather has completely recovered. After hearing that proposal, Chunyang finally agrees. He tells her that once he receives the rewards tomorrow, he'll provide the medicine the following day. Hearing that answer, Chu Xian is visibly pleased. She says that once her grandfather is cured, she will personally visit to express her gratitude. Chunyang immediately says that a personal visit isn't necessary. As far as he's concerned, keeping the secret is enough. Chu Xian agrees. She points out that if the treatment method is truly effective, then keeping it secret is in both of their interests. With that, the negotiation finally comes to an end. Chunyang raises his glass and proposes a pleasant cooperation. Chu Xian raises hers as well and returns the toast. The deal is officially made. Later, after Chunyang leaves, one of the guards reports back to Chu Xian and informs her that he has already departed. Chu Xian immediately gives another order. She tells them to keep a close eye on him and report any unusual movements immediately. The guard accepts the order and leaves. Once she's alone again, Chu Xian can only hope that Chunyang won't disappoint her, because everything she's done so far has been for one reason. She wants her grandfather to recover. Meanwhile, back at home, someone has been anxiously waiting for Chunyang's return. The moment he walks through the door, she rushes over and asks how the meeting went. More importantly, she wants to know whether Chu Xian made things difficult for him. He reassures her that everything is fine. According to him, Chu Xian simply wanted a favor from him. Then he tells her not to worry and to focus on being the female lead. Even after hearing that, she still looks uncertain and asks whether everything is really okay. Chunyang immediately asks whether he looks like the type of person who would fake having influence. Hearing that, she finally relaxes. She happily tells him that she knew he was the most reliable. Just then, another person suddenly rushes in. The newcomer immediately says that they absolutely need to vent about something. After a couple of coughs, she asks what happened. The newcomer then complains about running into another weirdo today. Hearing that, she can't help asking what kind of strange constitution this person has to keep attracting weird people. The newcomer immediately says she's wondering the exact same thing. Meanwhile, Chunyang has no intention of getting involved in that conversation. He tells them to continue chatting while he heads back to his room. Once inside, everything becomes quiet again. But then, a familiar sensation suddenly appears. The moment he feels it, Chunyang immediately realizes something. This feeling is the same one as before. The Tier 2 enhancement serum has been completely absorbed, and the moment he confirms that, he can't help getting excited. Back in his room, Chunyang starts testing his body. He throws a few punches into the air and does some training. After checking his condition, he realizes that his strength has increased by more than half compared to before. The improvement is obvious. Then he remembers something Li Lu told him. Normally, it takes at least a week to fully absorb a Tier 2 enhancement serum. Yet for him, the entire process finished in less than 3 days. That's way too fast. Looking at the Tier 3 serum in his hand, Chunyang decides not to rush things. For now, he'd rather figure out what's causing this abnormal absorption speed before injecting another serum. The next day, he heads back to Grey Rat District. The moment Li Lu sees him, she immediately gets excited and jumps onto him. Clearly, she's happy to see the boss again. After greeting her, Chunyang gets straight to the point. He tells her there's something he wants to ask. Li Lu asks what it is. Chunyang explains that his Tier 2 serum has already been completely absorbed and wants to know why it happened so quickly. Hearing that, Li Lu is surprised. She admits that she's never seen anyone absorb a Tier 2 serum that fast before. However, she does have a theory. According to her, before enhancement can fully take effect, the serum first repairs cells that have been contaminated by radiation. After hearing that explanation, Chun-Yang immediately starts understanding where she's going with this. Li Lu continues, the heavier the radiation contamination, the longer the repair process takes, which means the opposite is also true. If Chun-Yang absorbed the serum unusually fast, then his body must have almost no radiation contamination. And that's what confuses her. After the Great Cataclysm, everyone in the wasteland was exposed to radiation. So why is Chun-Yang different? The question immediately puts Chun-Yang on the spot. Fortunately, he reacts quickly. He lets out an awkward laugh and says that it seems the anti-radiation facilities used by his organization are extremely advanced. Then he immediately changes the subject and asks whether there are any risks associated with absorbing the serum too quickly. Li Lu says there aren't. Hearing that answer, Chun-Yang is relieved. At least now he doesn't have to worry about some hidden side effect suddenly appearing. With that matter settled, he gives Li Lu a new task. He tells her to trade for another recovery serum and says he'll come pick it up tomorrow. Li Lu immediately accepts the assignment. Then Chun-Yang tells her to continue with her work because he's going to visit Uncle Wei and collect the game. Li Lu says goodbye and the two separate. Soon afterward, Chun-Yang arrives at Uncle Wei's house. The first thing he asks is whether everything is ready. Uncle Wei tells him it's already prepared. Then he hands over a hard drive and explains that all of the project's data is stored inside. He also mentions that thanks to the help of the younger members, development progressed much faster than expected. After hearing that, Chun-Yang is very satisfied. He immediately announces a reward. Everyone who participated in the game's development will receive an extra month's worth of supplies. The moment those words come out, the entire room erupts with excitement. The employees are thrilled. Even Uncle Wei looks happy. Before long, everyone is cheering for Boss Chin. Back in the modern world, the situation is a lot less cheerful. Dandan reports a problem. The game license application has already been submitted. However, the approval process is being suppressed from above and hasn't been reviewed at all. As things stand, there is no way to launch the game on schedule. Chun-Yang remains surprisingly calm. He tells Dandan not to worry and to continue pushing forward with all the other work as planned. As for the game license, he'll find a way to handle it himself. Dandan immediately asks the obvious question. Does he know the person responsible for the reviews? Chun-Yang says no, but he does mention that he recently acquired a very valuable friendship. Then he hands over the game's source files. He tells Dandan to give them to the testing department first and have them spend some time playing the game. At the same time, they should summarize any potential modifications or improvements. Dandan takes the files and says she understands. Just then, Chun-Yang's phone rings. After answering, he hears Chu Xian's voice on the other end. This time, Chun-Yang doesn't waste any words. He immediately says there's something he would like her help with. Chu Xian asks what he needs. Chun-Yang explains that his company is preparing to release a game and asks whether she can help resolve the game license approval issue. After hearing the request, Chu Xian agrees almost immediately. According to her, it's no problem at all. Then she tells him to wait for good news. Hearing that, Chun-Yang is genuinely relieved. He thanks her for the help. However, Chu Xian quickly adds a condition. She reminds him that this will be the only favor she'll provide before he fulfills his side of the agreement. In other words, she's helping him this once, but the real deal still comes first. Chun-Yang naturally understands what she means. He tells her that he understands completely and promises that he will repay the favor. After finishing the call, Chun-Yang finally says that it's done. For the first time in a while, he allows himself to relax a little. But before he can enjoy the moment, he suddenly hears a huge commotion coming from outside. Confused, he wonders why it's so noisy. Meanwhile, several employees are running around excitedly. One girl asks Dandan whether she found it. Dandan says not yet and tells her to check somewhere else. Then suddenly, a guy shouts that he found it. According to him, the mountain-moving ghost was hiding inside the printer. At this point, the entire office has basically turned into a gaming battlefield. Everyone is running around chasing monsters. Others are celebrating because their spirit beasts leveled up. The atmosphere is completely chaotic. When Chun-Yang arrives, he immediately notices how absorbed everyone is. He comments that they seem to be having a lot of fun. The moment the employees see him, they start bombarding him with questions. One girl excitedly asks how such effects were even created. Another employee says that when he first opened the game, one of the creatures suddenly appeared and scared him so badly he nearly peed himself. Honestly, that's a pretty convincing product test. Chun-Yang just smiles and tells them this is only a small demonstration. According to him, they'll see even more advanced technology in the future. future. After letting everyone calm down, he asks for some quiet because he has a few announcements to make. The first announcement immediately gets everyone's attention. He tells them that the game license review will be completed today and won't affect the game's launch schedule. The moment they hear that, everyone is relieved. One girl immediately says that's great news. Then Chunyong moves on to the second announcement. He officially reveals the game's name. From now on, the game will be called The Unknown World. All future publicity and promotional activities will use that name. After that, Chunyong asks who the company's legal counsel is. Dandin immediately calls Luo Qing forward. Luo Qing introduces herself as the company's legal counsel. Chunyong then explains that there will be a contract signing at 2 p.m. that afternoon and that he needs her present. Then he casually drops another bombshell. He announces that he has secured 100 million in angel round financing, which means nobody needs to worry about the company's cash flow anymore. On top of that, he tells everyone that as long as they're willing to work hard, he won't be stingy when it comes to compensation. The office instantly becomes even more excited. Some employees praise the boss for being generous. Others directly thank him. Meanwhile, the next day arrives. A lawyer representing the Chu family shows up at the company. The lawyer introduces himself as he's sure and explains that he's attending on Miss Chu's behalf. After greeting him, Chunyong invites him inside. Then the lawyer places a document on the table. According to him, it's the financing contract drafted for this investment round. Chunyong doesn't rush to review it himself. Instead, he immediately asks his legal counsel to examine it first. After reading through the document, Luo Qing's expression changes completely. She looks genuinely shocked. Seeing her reaction, Chunyong asks whether there's a problem. Luo Qing immediately shakes her head. Not only is there no problem, but from her perspective, the terms are unbelievably generous. The Chu family is investing 100 million in cash, yet they're only taking 5% of the company's shares. And if the company fails to make money in the future, the investors can't blame them for losing their investment. Even as she's saying it, Luo Qing sounds like she can barely believe the contract is real. After hearing Luo Qing's opinion, Chunyong asks one final question. Are there any legal issues with the contract? Luo Qing immediately shakes her head. According to her, there are no problems at all. The contract is completely fine. She tells him he can sign and stamp it without worrying. With that confirmation, Chunyong doesn't hesitate. He signs the contract and officially stamps it. Seeing everything finalized, he informs him that the 100 million capital injection will be transferred into the company's account later that day. Chunyong thanks him for the effort. Soon afterward, the meeting comes to an end. As he prepares to leave, Chunyong personally sees him out. He thanks him again for making the trip. He politely replies that Chunyong is being too courteous and says this is simply part of his job. The two exchange farewells, and Chunyong wishes him a safe journey. After seeing everyone off, Chunyong heads back inside. The moment he enters, he immediately hears a lot of noise. The office is incredibly lively. Curious, he asks what's going on. Meanwhile, Dandin is rallying the team. She tells everyone that the boss has already done everything he possibly could. From this point forward, the promotion campaign is in their hands. One of the employees immediately responds with confidence. She says that the game's quality is so high that it practically has no competitors. And if they can't successfully promote a game like this, she'll go live in the mountains and become a monkey. That statement instantly tells you how confident everyone is feeling right now. Dandin quickly tells everyone to settle down and get back to work. Then she reminds them of the goal. Tomorrow morning, they'll fire the first shot of a new era for mobile games. The entire office immediately responds with excitement. Everyone enthusiastically agrees. Watching all of this, Chunyong feels reassured. With morale this high, he doesn't think there should be any major problems left. Just then, his phone suddenly rings. Looking at the caller ID, he sees that it's Chu Xian. Chunyong answers the call. On the other end, Chu Xian informs him that all of his grandfather's medical records have already been modified. Then she reminds him not to forget the promise he made. Chunyong tells her not to worry. He has no intention of going back on his word. According to their agreement, he'll deliver the medicine tomorrow morning. Hearing that, Chu Xian suggests meeting at the usual location. Chunyong agrees. The two arrange the meeting and end the call. Now, all that's left is for Chunyong to fulfill his side of the deal. The next day, the atmosphere around the Chu family is extremely tense. Inside the hospital room, a nurse urgently reports that the patient's organs are experiencing massive failure and that his vital signs are deteriorating rapidly. Dr. Shin immediately steps forward and starts giving orders. He tells the staff to increase the medication dosage, closely monitor the patient's breathing, and be prepared to perform CPR at any moment. The medical team immediately gets to work, doing everything they can to stabilize the situation. Meanwhile, Chu Xian anxiously asks about her grandfather's condition. Unfortunately, Dr. Shin doesn't have good news. He explains that the cancer cells have spread even further and triggered a chain reaction of organ failure throughout the body. At this point, there is nothing more they can do. Then he delivers the news nobody wants to hear. The hospital can only use machines to keep the old man conscious for the next 2 days. If there is anything the family wants to say, they should say it as soon as possible. Just then, a guard arrives. He informs Dr. Shin that the family head is currently discussing matters in the main hall and wants to see him immediately. Dr. Shin says he understands. Before leaving, he tells Chu Xian to accept his condolences. After everyone leaves, Chu Xian is left standing there alone. At this point, all of her hopes are resting on one person. She can only silently hope that Chun Yang arrives in time. Meanwhile, in the wasteland world, the atmosphere couldn't be more different. Li Lu is busy organizing paperwork while a bag of gold sits nearby. When Chun Yang arrives, he immediately asks what she's working on. Li Lu explains that she's arranging the distribution of next month's supplies. Then Chun Yang notices the gold and asks why it's there. After all, he already told everyone there was no need to specifically collect it anymore. Li Lu quickly explains. The gold wasn't intentionally gathered. Everyone found it while carrying out infrastructure construction projects. Originally, they planned to throw it away, but she thought Chun Yang might still have a use for it, so she had them keep it instead. After explaining that, she hands over the recovery serum he requested. Chun Yang checks it and says very good. Then Li Lu remembers something else. During yesterday's transaction, he Jenny from the Doctors Association made a special request. Naturally, Chun Yang wants to know what it is. Li Lu explains that he genuinely wants to meet him in person. That immediately makes Chun Yang curious. He asks why someone from the Doctors Association would want to meet him. Li Lu says she believes he genuinely is probably interested in establishing a deeper cooperative relationship. Then Chun Yang asks for her opinion. Li Lu doesn't hesitate. She recommends agreeing to the meeting. According to her, he genuinely is currently one of the base's most important partners. Not only does he provide access to enhancement serums and recovery serums, but he also acts as an intermediary for purchasing firearms and other weapons. Because of that, he's an indispensable partner for the base. On top of that, maintaining a good relationship with the Doctors Association would only benefit them in the long run. After hearing her analysis, Chun Yang agrees. He tells Li Lu to arrange the meeting. Have he Jian come to the base tomorrow. Then they'll meet face to face. Li Lu immediately accepts the order and says she'll make the arrangements. After hearing Li Lu's analysis, Chun Yang praises her and says she's truly very capable. The compliment immediately makes her happy. Meanwhile, back in the modern world, Chun Yang suddenly notices that he has missed multiple calls from Chu Xian. The moment he calls back, Chu Xian immediately picks up. She tells him that he finally answered and asks whether he can deliver the medicine right now. Hearing how urgent she sounds, Chun Yang immediately asks what happened. Chu Xian explains that her grandfather's condition has worsened again. According to her, his life could be in danger at any moment. The moment Chun Yang hears that, he stops wasting time. He tells her to send him the address. Soon afterward, he arrives at the Chu family estate. A guard immediately comes forward and tells him to follow. Chun Yang politely thanks him and follows behind. As he walks through the property, he can't help noticing how impressive the place is. Before long, Chu Xian personally comes out to meet him. Without wasting any time, Chun Yang takes out the recovery serum and hands it over. Then he carefully explains the conditions. For the sake of secrecy, Chu Xian must personally perform the injection. Afterward, the syringe must be destroyed immediately. Most importantly, nobody except her and her grandfather can know about this medicine. Chu Xian agrees without hesitation. Then she takes the serum and looks back toward the room where her grandfather is resting. She tells Chun Yang that if this medicine truly cures her grandfather, then he will forever be considered her friend. With that, she immediately rushes off. Not walking, not jogging, running. The situation has already become that critical. When she reaches her grandfather's room, she asks to speak with him alone. The nurses and medical staff are sent outside. Lying in bed, the old man asks what is going on. His condition is clearly poor, and even speaking takes effort. Once they are alone, Chu Xian finally takes out the syringe. Holding back her emotions, she tells her grandfather that she has obtained a special medicine that can cure him. Then she asks whether he is willing to try it. The old man doesn't hesitate. He tells her that he only has a few days left anyway. If she wants to try, then she should go ahead. And even if it fails, he won't blame her. Hearing those words, Chu Xian can no longer hold back her tears. She tells him she understands. Then, with trembling hands, she injects the medicine. After that, there is nothing left to do except wait. Both grandfather and granddaughter can only watch and hope to see whether this miracle medicine will truly work. Trying to comfort her, the old man tells her not to be afraid. He says he knows his own body better than anyone and that her intentions alone are already enough. But before he can say much more, something suddenly changes. A strange feeling spreads through his body. Then, to Chu Xian's shock, he slowly sits up. Seeing this, she immediately rushes over and asks what's wrong. The old man looks at his hands and then at his legs. He says that strength has suddenly returned to his limbs. In fact, he feels like he's recovered. The moment she hears that, Chu Xian completely loses control of her emotions. She starts crying and says it actually worked. It really worked. Then she immediately says she'll call someone to perform a full-body examination. However, her grandfather quickly stops her. He tells her to come back first. Confused, Chu Xian asks what's wrong. The old man then asks where she got the serum. Chu Xian explains that she received it from a friend. The moment he hears that answer, his expression becomes serious. He tells her that she's already an adult and shouldn't act so recklessly. Then he points out the biggest problem. If she suddenly runs out and starts calling doctors, how is she going to explain his recovery? Chu Xian immediately says she'll just tell everyone that a friend gave him a home remedy. The old man almost can't believe what he's hearing. He tells her that's incredibly naive. A home remedy that completely cures someone who is practically at death's door? Nobody would believe that. Then he explains the real danger. A medicine capable of curing cancer would create a massive sensation if it were exposed. Because of that, they absolutely cannot allow the serum or the person who provided it to be revealed so casually. Chu Xian understands the concern. However, she points out that his recovery is so sudden that people will still want an explanation. The old man simply says they don't owe anyone an explanation. According to him, they can just tell everyone that he suddenly got better on his own. Chu Xian asks what happens if nobody believes that story. The old man immediately dismisses the concern. If people don't believe it, then they don't believe it. What are they going to do? Come interrogate him personally? As far as he's concerned, protecting the person who provided the serum is the top priority. Under no circumstances can that person be exposed. Hearing that, Chu Xian promises that she understands. She tells her grandfather to rest assured because she knows exactly what to do. Satisfied with that answer, the old man lies back down on the bed. He points out that suddenly walking around normally would be far too conspicuous. For now, it's better to continue acting naturally. Then Chu Xian brings up another matter. She mentions that she already invested money into Chun Yang's newly established gaming company. According to her, it was basically like handing him 100 million for free. But her grandfather immediately shakes his head. He tells her she's thinking about it the wrong way. If Chun Yang truly wanted money, a serum like this could potentially earn hundreds of billions. Compared to that, 100 million is nothing. In his opinion, the reason Chun Yang accepted the investment is probably because he didn't want Chu Xian to feel burdened by receiving such a huge favor. Hearing that explanation, Chu Xian suddenly finds it difficult to argue. When she thinks about it carefully, it actually makes sense. Then the old man suddenly changes the topic. With a very interested look on his face, he starts asking questions about this mysterious friend. He wants to know whether the friend is a man or a woman, how old, and most importantly, whether that person is married. After hearing her grandfather's questions, Chu Xian immediately becomes embarrassed. She asks what kind of nonsense he's thinking about. The old man simply laughs it off. He tells her that maybe he's thinking too much. However, he still insists on one thing. At some point in the future, she must find an opportunity to bring this friend over so he can meet him personally. Hearing that, Chu Xian becomes even more shy. Meanwhile, completely unaware of this conversation, Chun Yang suddenly sneezes. Then he jokingly wonders whether he's become more handsome lately, and that's why so many people seem to be thinking about him. Just then, a message arrives from Dandan. The update is exactly what he's been waiting for. The Unknown World has officially launched across all major platforms. Not only that, but the download numbers are climbing rapidly. Seeing this, Chun Yang is very satisfied. After all, a holographic projection game like this simply doesn't exist anywhere else. In his opinion, once players experience it for themselves, it's guaranteed to cause a sensation. He's already looking forward to seeing tomorrow's revenue and user data. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, a tired office worker is standing during the evening rush hour. Looking around at the crowded surroundings, he's already in a bad mood. Then he starts scrolling through games on his phone. He's completely bored with all the old games and can't help wondering whether anyone will release something new for once. That's when an advertisement catches his attention. A Xianxia AR game. Download size, around 400 megabytes. The ad even claims it can satisfy all of your Xianxia dreams. The man immediately becomes skeptical. A 400 megabytes AR game? To him, that sounds ridiculous. He wonders whether the developers even thought before writing the advertisement. Still, curiosity gets the better of him, so he decides to download it just to see what's going on. A short while later, the registration process finishes successfully, and then something suddenly appears. A cute little rabbit starts flying around him. The man nearly jumps out of his skin. He immediately lets out a shocked scream. At the same time, the people nearby notice it too. One older man stares at the rabbit and asks what exactly is sitting on the young man's shoulder. AR? Another person looks closer and immediately becomes interested. To him, this looks less like ordinary AR and more like the holographic projection technology from science fiction movies. The older man can't stop staring. The rabbit looks unbelievably realistic. He asks how the young man managed to create something like this, but the young man is just as confused. He explains that he doesn't know either. All he did was casually download a mobile game, and then this little thing suddenly appeared. Not long after launch, the first batch of game data finally arrives. Dandin immediately rushes over to check it. One of the employees hands her the report, and the moment she reads it, her eyes widen. Without wasting a second, she grabs the paper and hurries toward Chun Yang's office. The guy has been waiting for this report all day. Dandin excitedly tells him that the results are in. Without any promotion, advertising, or marketing campaign, The Unknown World has already surpassed 1 million downloads on its very first day. And that's not even the craziest part. The paid conversion rate has reached an unbelievable 40%. Most companies would throw a party over numbers like that, but Chun Yang's reaction is completely different. After hearing the report, he casually says that the actual data is a little lower than he expected. The entire mood instantly changes. Dandin just stares at him. Lower than expected? Is this guy serious? She immediately points out that normal games struggle to reach even a 2% payment rate. Meanwhile, their game is sitting at 40%. At that point, she doesn't even know what to say anymore. But Chun Yang simply asks one question. Is their game a normal game? And honestly, after seeing holographic rabbits flying around people's shoulders, it's hard to argue with him. Dandin can only go silent. Then Chun Yang says that they're going to build a great company and win purely through product quality. As he speaks, he casually opens the game on his phone. A dragon immediately appears beside him. Even after seeing the technology before, the effect is still impressive. Then he gives Dandin another task. Starting today, all employees should keep the game running during their commute to and from work. Dandin immediately says she understands and heads off to notify everyone. Later that night, around 9 p.m., employees begin leaving work. One girl is already on her way home when she suddenly remembers something. She almost forgot to open the game. The moment she launches it, her companion spirit beast appears beside her. Looking at the little creature, she can't help smiling. It's unbelievably cute. The only thing she finds disappointing is that she can't physically touch it. Still, that doesn't stop her enthusiasm. She pumps herself up and says they have to make this game the #1 game in the entire country. At the same time, she raises her hand for a high five. The little creature copies the action. Seeing that, she becomes even more motivated. Later, after arriving home, she announces that she's back. Inside, someone is already waiting. It's Sujuan, a reporter from a gaming magazine. Seeing her arrive late, Sujuan asks whether she worked overtime again and whether she's eaten yet. The employee says she already ate. Then Sujuan's attention is immediately stolen by the little creature floating nearby. She asks what it is. The employee proudly explains that it's a companion spirit beast from the game developed by her company. According to her, the creature can be projected into reality through a mobile phone. The reporter is completely stunned. She asks whether she can touch it. The employee tells her to go ahead and try, although she won't actually feel anything. Sujuan reaches out, and sure enough, her hand passes right through it. The reporter is shocked. It really is a holographic image. Then she asks again whether this game was genuinely developed by her company. The employee confidently says yes. She even guarantees that no other game company has this kind of technology. Hearing that, Sujuan becomes even more excited. As a gaming reporter, she instantly realizes what she's looking at. Then she asks whether she can visit the company tomorrow for an interview, because in her eyes, This isn't just another mobile game. This is a completely disruptive product. Hearing that, QQ suddenly remembers something. She points out that Sujuan is a reporter for a gaming magazine after all. Then she says she'll send a message to President Zhao first and ask for permission. The moment she hears that, Sujuan becomes even more excited. As a gaming reporter, she immediately realizes how huge this opportunity is. In her mind, she's already calculating the potential traffic. An exclusive interview for a game like The Unknown World, that alone could probably complete her page view quota for the entire year. The more she thinks about it, the more excited she becomes. Her brain is already coming up with headlines. Exclusive report, The Unknown World, the mobile game that changed everything. The mystery behind The Unknown World. One after another, title ideas start popping into her head. At this point, she's practically seeing page views flying toward her. Then she immediately grabs QQ and starts pleading. She says that no matter what happens, QQ absolutely has to help her convince the boss to accept the interview. To make her offer even more tempting, she promises a reward. If the interview succeeds, she'll treat QQ to 3 big meals. Not 1, not 2, 3. The level of determination is honestly impressive. If you don't want to miss what happens next, then subscribe right now, turning on all the notifications. In the meantime, you can check out these other crazy stories as well.